Chapter 1247. Fan Wu Jie was grabbed by a giant dark golden palm and was being suppressed to the bottom of the ancient city of Azura. Only then did Fan Wu Jie realize that under the suppression of the giant city, there was a giant blood mist vortex at the bottom that led to the bottom of the mysterious blood sea. Taoist Yuan Yu exclaimed, "Could this be the great fortune of the ancient city of Azura? Are you saying that the ancient city of Azura was built because of this giant blood sea? Taoist Yuan Yu smiled bitterly and said, "Rather than saying that the city of Azura was built because of this great fortune, it would be better to say that the ancient city of Azura was built to suppress this strange vortex. There must be great danger in it." "Nonsense." Fan Wu Jie rolled his eyes and said, "The Azura clan has built a prison here. Do you think it's just for us to enjoy?" He struggled violently and said to the giant who was holding him, "Friend, I have treated you with sincerity. Why do you want to harm me? I followed your good intentions and gave you pointers, pretending to be the true disciple of the destruction demon ancestor. But I angered the Azura king and was thrown into this desperate situation. Why do you want to harm me? I hope that you can give me some pointers on account of our past relationship, so that I can die in peace." Fan Wu Jie and Yuan Yu were thrown into the blood-colored whirlpool beneath the ancient Azura city, and the Azura celestial general, who was holding on to Fan Wu Jie, said with a guilty expression, "I told you not to say that you were a disciple of the slaughtering demon ancestor, but I didn't tell you to boast like that, because the king is not a direct descendant of the slaughter demon ancestor. He has been ostracized time and time again. So if you say that you are a disciple of the slaughter demon ancestor, the king will definitely humiliate you. But who would have thought that you would be so bold to brag that you would rescue the destruction demon ancestor? The destruction demon ancestor is a taboo in the prehistoric world and even in the universe. Rescuing him is equivalent to setting off a great calamity. How can you say such words so casually? You won't be able to live for much longer. Let me tell you a secret. Although it is said that the Azura clan is a blood sea clan created by the slaughtered demon ancestor, according to the oldest legend of the Azura clan, we were created by Devil Luo. We are the descendants of those demon gods who followed Devil Luo to attack the untainted land. Moro is Demon Ro, the true name of demon ancestor of destruction. Originally, no one would believe this ancient legend. The slaughtered demon ancestor suppressed the destruction demon ancestor. Our demonic path knows how to seek advantages and avoid disadvantages the most. We know how to adapt to the circumstances. Who would follow a suppressed destruction demon ancestor? Now that we, the Azura clan, are in the ultimate, cultivating the great Tao of destruction and are basking in the light of the Ro demon ancestor. Naturally, we have to say that we are the disciples of the destruction demon god. Therefore, we have to acknowledge our ancestors again and establish that ancient legend as the orthodoxy. We will become a branch of the Azura clan created by the destruction demon ancestor. Then, some terrifying existences in the ultimate will behave themselves and not dare to provoke us. But this doesn't mean that we dare to release the destruction demon ancestor. Ever since the birth of the human race, we, the Azura clan, have become stepmothers and stepmothers. The slaughter demon ancestor believes that the human race is the true natural seed of the demonic path. The human race is naturally cunning, vicious, and terrifyingly scheming. Moreover, they are very evil, far surpassing us simple Azura. Therefore, he established the great Azura demon sect in the human race, intending to let the human race occupy the demonic path orthodoxy. At that time, my king was dissatisfied, so he framed the great Azura demon sect a few times. In the end, you've never played with the demons of the human race? Seeing the Azura divine general's blushing face, Fan Wu Jie couldn't help but cover his face and sigh. I've embarrassed the human race. I've actually been tricked by you seemingly simple and honest Azura. I've embarrassed the human seniors who plotted against the Azura clan in the past. Now that Fan Wu Jie knew the truth, he was even more depressed than before. The three views of a demonic path are indeed twisted. One doesn't feel ashamed of tricking others, but instead feels proud of it. The other feels ashamed of being plotted against by the enemy, thinking that he hasn't understood the essence of the demonic path's viciousness. Old Taoist Yuan Yu lamented, "Such twisted views. Where are the benevolence, righteousness, and morality? Where is the spirit of the human race?" The Azura divine general scratched his head and said, "The human race is very sinister." His Majesty said that you humans are all innocent and harmless when you're weak and kind to others. But once you're strong, you'll commit all sorts of crimes, and you're passionate about destruction and slaughter. There's no race in the entire universe that has more killing and destruction traits than you humans. Your hearts are always filled with an exuberant desire for destruction. No wonder you're the most evil race in the universe. My king said that losing to the human race is the most convincing loss he's ever suffered in his life. You humans are ruthless to yourselves, even more ruthless to others. You raise the butcher's knife to your own kind, and you're even crueler to other races. No wonder you're the true seeds of the demonic path recognized by the slaughter demon ancestor. You export benevolence, righteousness, and morality to the outside world, but behind the scenes, you use benevolence, righteousness, and morality to slaughter without shedding a drop of blood. Any beautiful thing in the hands of the human race can become a weapon of slaughter and destruction. You're really the seeds of the demonic path. The future of the demonic path lies in the hope of the rise of the demonic path. The future of the demonic path will belong to the human race. My king recognized this. That's why he had to flee to the returning ruins. Because if he stayed in the universe, the Azura clan would sooner or later be exterminated by the human race. Even if he was lucky enough not to be exterminated, the demonic path of the human race who has cultivated the great Azura immortal body will evolve peacefully from within. Also, what you're saying, are you one of those righteous people who talk about benevolence, righteousness, and morality, but are even more cunning and ruthless than the demonic path? The god general pressed his hand on the halberd, intending to draw his saber and hack Yuan Yu if he couldn't answer. Yuan Yu's expression didn't change, and he calmly said, "I originally wanted to brainwash you with benevolence, righteousness, and morality, so that you would feel ashamed of us, and then plot against you behind your back when you weren't paying attention. Since you've seen through it, I won't pretend anymore. All the people who cultivate the demonic path in this world are our competitors. If there's one more bad person in the world, our living space will be smaller. If there's one more good person, there's one more fat sheep that's easy to slaughter. Even the demonic path likes good people and hates those who are vicious and sinister. The biggest dream of every demonic path person is that I'm the only bad person in the world. So don't think that I preach benevolence, righteousness, and morality to others. It's actually all a trick. That's right. You humans are still the most vicious." The Azura god general also sighed. Originally, the primitive world was so simple. We Azuras only needed to be a little cunning to trick those celestial beings and innate races and gain the upper hand. Later on, you humans were born, and your cunning schemes made us Azuras seem simple and honest. Then, we Azuras couldn't survive in the various worlds and had no choice but to hide in the ultimate. Clearly, there's more evil than the other. The Azura godly general said sincerely, "In Luo, Aloha City, the hypocrites of the righteous path will be killed the moment they enter. Those who can't be provoked will be banished to the dangerous lands of the ultimate ruins. As for the true disciples of the slaughtering demon lord, they will also be ruthlessly humiliated. Only then will they be able to help us vent the anger of the Azura tribe being bullied by the humans and being raised by the slaughtering demon lord like a stepmother. Only when we see the disciples of the massacred demon ancestor will our king feel a little better. If you pretended to be inferior disciples of the massacred demon ancestor and failed to save the massacred demon ancestor, you might have had a good ending, but now..." The god general sighed and shook his head. He grabbed the two of them and sent them into the Blood Sea whirlpool. In the blink of an eye, Fan Wujie and Yuan Yu were thrown into the depths of the Blood Sea whirlpool. The powerful force of the Blood Sea whirlpool twisted the space-time inside like a thin noodle, and it went deep into the whirlpool. Fan Wu Jie seemed to be stuffed into a noodle by a powerful force, and his whole body was squeezed into a long line, spinning madly as he was sucked into the Blood Sea whirlpool. The Blood Sea whirlpool was still reverberating with the power of the great Tao of destruction. Any existence that came into contact with even a tiny bit of it would inevitably fall into decline and destruction. Fan Wu Jie had used the time-light true water to set up a 10,000-year time barrier in front of him, and only then did he barely manage to survive the waves of destructive tides, successfully falling into the Blood Sea prison alive. Even so, he felt the great Tao of destruction coming at him like a tide, and the time-light true water that was corroding and infecting him began to corrode his lifespan and life. Stinky sweat began to seep out of his armpits, and his body was covered in filth. The halo above his head that represented his Tao monarch status naturally withered. This meant that he was beginning to step into the tribulation of decay, and Fan Wu Jie felt that if this continued, he might not be able to last more than 10 years. Now that he didn't have the time-light true water, he would be destroyed by the great Tao of destruction. And even if he used the time-light true water to protect himself, he would be contaminated by the great Tao of destruction and turn into the power of the tribulation of decay. Fortunately, compared to the true tribulation of decay, this power was insignificant. Innate time Tao seed, suppress. Fan Wu Jie could only use the Tao seed and let it suppress the power of time for him. Looking at the power of the Tao seed being slowly whittled away by the tribulation of decay, Fan Wu Jie's heart ached. This was his future accumulation for achieving the Tao. Fortunately, the power of the Tao seed could last longer, allowing his Tao Lord conjured body to slowly regain its tranquility. Although the power of the Tao seed was weakening, it was still not enough. The embryonic form of the great Tao inside was being polished and matured. Tao friend Fan. Suddenly, Fan Wu Jie heard a pitiful cry by his ear. He turned his head and saw old Taoist Yuan Yu bobbing up and down in the Blood Sea whirlpool. There was only a thin layer of starlight supporting him from being destroyed by the great Tao of destruction, and it looked like he would not be able to hold on for much longer. Fan Wu Jie sighed, and he let go of the time-light true water to let him in. Tao friend Fan. Old Taoist Yuan Yu said pitifully, "This tribulation of decay is coming to an end. Let's work together to get through this distance." Old Taoist, Fan Wu Jie said with a cold face, "Is this your survival experience in the bottomless ruins? How would I know that these Azuras are evil and their acting skills are so good? Just by thinking that they are hiding in the depths of the bottomless ruins, they must be loyal to the destructive demon ancestor. I have also heard of the ancient legend of the origin of the Azura race, and it is said that they are protected by the destructive demon ancestor, which is why they can live so comfortably in the depths of the bottomless ruins. Once they heard that the Azura king wants to do something big, of course they would think that they want to save the destructive demon ancestor, but who knew that they would not play by the rules?" Old Taoist Yuan Yu slapped his face and said, "That's true. To be able to live so comfortably in the bottomless ruins, of course they can't be loyal to the destructive demon ancestor, or else the mystic door Buddhists, and even the massacred demon ancestor disciples would have killed them long ago. I should have known that those who are willing to take root in the bottomless ruins are either loyal to the destructive demon ancestor and want to save the demon ancestor, destroy the heavens, and create their world, or they can no longer survive in the outside world. I have always thought that the Azura race is using the name of the latter as the former, pretending to be loyal to the destructive demon ancestor who can no longer survive. But I actually forgot that there is another possibility. They can also be a backup to guard the destructive demon ancestor and not let him remove the seal. This Shemali must be a multifaceted spy. Who knows, he might use us to claim credit to the mystic door Buddhists. The weak ones who are loyal to the destructive demon ancestor will be taken down to claim credit and reward, and the strong ones will claim that they're also the direct descendants of the destructive demon ancestor, and then secretly report to the mystic door Buddhists. They are eating two sides at the same time. Have you thought it through now?" Fan Wu Jie stared at him and said, What have you been doing before? How could I have thought that the most famous Azura race in the bottomless ruins, whose entire race cultivates the great Tao of destruction, who claims to be the direct descendants of the destructive demon ancestor, would be like this? I only knew that in the bottomless ruins, the great Tao of destruction is powerful, and the power of the destructive demon ancestor is the strongest. Who would have thought that there would be spies? Don't be in a hurry to discuss who is responsible. Let's first survive and talk about it. The vitality-corroding blood mist below had already turned into liquid, and a trace of the divine power of the boundless blood sea of the past had been reproduced. The entire vitality-corroding blood sea of the boundless blood sea became denser the deeper they went, and at the ultra-high-density lower half of the whirlpool in the eye of the sea, it simply turned into liquid and returned to the state of the true blood river water. A drop of the true blood river water that was eroded by the great Tao of destruction was thousands of times more powerful than the vitality-corroding blood mist. Fan Wujie was so scared that his soul almost left his body. The blood mist that was derived from a trace of the true blood river water was already so terrifying. How could he survive if he fell into the true blood river water that was really eroded by the great Tao of destruction? Suddenly, Fan Wujie vaguely saw from the corner of his eyes that in the center of the whirlpool of the true blood river water, a ghastly white palm bone stubbornly stretched out, and its posture seemed to be holding up the sky. As the two people fell rapidly, the palm bone became bigger and bigger in their sight, and finally, it occupied their entire vision. The palm that rose from the blood sea whirlpool of the unknown god was like a majestic continent. Its knuckles were like mountains, and the gaps between its bones were like valleys, and the cracks that had been eroded by the wind had become thousands of ravines on the continent. The remaining power of the divinity of its hand bone was holding up a pure land in the middle of the blood sea whirlpool, a space that was not corroded by the power of destruction. But upon closer inspection, one would realize that the hand bone contained an even more demonic power of destruction, and that was why it was able to suppress the remaining waves of the great Tao of destruction. Calculating according to the proportions of the body, Fan Wujie was shocked to find that the unknown god, if his true body was complete, would not be any smaller than a world, and would be larger than most of the worlds in the universe. It was about the size of the complete Brahma heaven realm. Fan Wujie carried Yuan Yu and smashed heavily into the center of the land formed by the demonic hand bone. Falling from such a height was really nothing to the two of them. Old Taoist Yuan Yu immediately patted his buttocks and stood up. He looked at the Pure Land with a complicated expression and said, "So the Azura clan was not a traitor from the very beginning. The land of white bones was filled with broken corpses. Those who could survive the power of destruction were innate life forms that were at least heavenly gods or postnatal life forms that had cultivated to become Tao lords. But judging from the abnormally tall skeletons, those who were buried here were all innate life forms. Just how many people had died here?" Fan Wujie felt his hands and feet go cold. There were more than 10 million skeletons here, and the Azura king sent down 10 heavenly gods every day. It would take countless years to fill up this place. So how did all these skeletons accumulate? What kind of earth-shattering battle had taken place here? Fan Wujie glanced at the giant hand bone that supported these skeletons, and his heart became even more sorrowful. It was just a hand bone, but it was able to suppress the power of destruction in the center of the blood sea whirlpool. Just how powerful was this god when he was alive? This was an Azura king, and it was a great Azura king that ruled over all the other Azura kings. Yuan Yu said in a sad tone. He was plotted against by his own clansmen and trapped in the whirlpool of the sea. Although the blood sea could wear out his body, it could not kill him. So he roared with all his might, and his voice was like thunder, echoing in the sea for countless years. "Is that so?" Fan Wujie said strangely. "Why didn't I hear it?" "You used the time-light true water as a barrier, delaying the time it took for the roar to reach your ears. It would take 10,000 years before you could hear the roar, but I heard it clearly. When I fell into the sea, Although I did not have the invincible divine ability of the time-light true water to protect myself, I was not a pushover, and I still had a few tricks up my sleeve, so I should not have been in such a difficult situation. But who would have thought that when I used the strongest divine ability of my life, a loud roar would shatter it all? His body was truly like thunder. Look at that blood sea whirlpool. Even though this great Azura king was dead, he was still firmly rooted in the center of the whirlpool, and it did not change at all for millions of years. It was clear that his divine body had reached a state where it could not be worn down and was indestructible. Back then, because Chio's body had reached this state, the Yellow Emperor could not do anything to his corpse, and had no choice but to dismember it and suppress it. Look, Yuan Yu pointed at the center of the blood sea whirlpool, and under the roiling blood true water, Fan Wu Jie could faintly see the outline of the true body of the god in the center of the whirlpool. Judging from the undercurrent of the blood true water being blocked, this great Azura king's shoulders were extremely broad. His shoulders were broad enough to cause the sea to surge, and his roar was like thunder. This reminds me of a great Azura king. His bravery was unparalleled, and he was the vanguard of the Azura tribe against the heavenly gods. The great Azura King Poya? This is a tragic betrayal. Poya King must have believed in the ancient legend of the Azura tribe. No, he must have been the king of the Azuras who had followed Ro, the former king of the Shimori tribe. Back then, Destruction Demon Ancestor Ro and Slaughter Demon Ancestor River Styx had failed in their fight for the orthodox position of the demonic path, and he was suppressed in the returning ruins CEI. Of course, his subordinates would also be punished. Poya, great Azura king, led the remnants of Ro's troops to the returning ruins in an attempt to rescue his former master, but it was already too late, and they were betrayed. Slaughter Demon Ancestor secretly bribed his subordinates, and when he was surrounded by the Buddhists from the Mystic Door, he suddenly attacked and sent him into a dangerous place in the returning ruins, where he was trapped. Slaughter Demon Ancestor River Styx stirred up the blood CI and sent a huge wave of blood into the returning ruins, drowning Poya King, who was trapped in a dangerous place. Using the blood sea true water and the destructive power of the returning ruins, he formed the CI and wore down Poya King's immortal body. Finally, Yuantu stabbed him in the head and ended the life of this powerful great Azura king. Then, he suppressed the remaining loyal subordinates of Ro into the sea eye of the blood sea and imprisoned them. In his last breath, Poya King summoned his last bit of strength, and with a roar, he reached out of the blood sea and lifted up his subordinates, forming this pure land. How do you know all this? Fan Wu Jie looked like he had seen a ghost. Not only do I know all this, I also know who betrayed Poya King. Yuan Yu said calmly. Fan Wu Jie thought for a moment, and then he understood. King Shimori built this CEI and suppressed the blood sea whirlpool, so it is not difficult to guess that he is the subordinate who betrayed Poya King. So, the Azura tribe did not betray the Destruction Demon Ancestor from the beginning. But after a tragic coup, and after all the opponents were suppressed, they completely betrayed the Destruction Demon Ancestor. You should have learned about these things from those angry roars. That's right, a voice that was gnashing its teeth, and its tone was filled with deep resentment, continued. It is because of this traitor, Shimori, that my king was plotted against and killed. We were suppressed here, and the plan to save the demon ancestor failed miserably. We have been imprisoned here for countless eons, and the reason why we can hold on until now is to find that traitor for revenge. A dried corpse with 9 heads and 12 arms, which looked like a white skeleton, crawled up from the pile of corpses and stared at them with a pair of blood-red eyes. It seemed as if it had not spoken for many years, and its voice was as unpleasant as sawing wood, but the monstrous resentment in its tone was shocking. Chapter 1248. Who are you? Why were you thrown down by the traitor, Shimori? The mummy said in a voice that could make one's hair stand on end. Fan Wu Jie glanced over and realized that the mummy might have been very powerful in the past, but after spending so many years in the eye of the blood sea, He was already at the end of his rope. Fan Wujie thought to himself, "We've just arrived here, so we don't know the exact situation at the bottom of the Eye of the Sea. Since this person could survive in the Eye of the Sea for so many years, he must be very familiar with the taboos here. He's already at the end of his rope, so why don't we capture him and interrogate him?" He sneered and said, "Who are we? Do you think you have a right to ask? You have a hideous appearance, and you don't look like a good person. You're definitely an extremely vicious person. I'm just about to capture you and carefully search your soul. If you don't harbor evil intentions and plot against me, it won't be too late to let you go." He was about to attack when Taoist Yuan Yu pulled him back and said, "Little Fan, this place is very strange. We can't act rashly. Why don't we get him to talk first? We're blind and don't know anything. What's the point of getting information out of him? Do we dare to believe what he said? Why don't we search his soul? I have a cosmic soul searching technique that can see the time mark on his soul. It's very reliable." A ferocious glint flashed across old Taoist Yuan Yu's eyes when he heard that. He sent a voice transmission and said, "In that case, I'll play the good cop and pretend to argue with you to gain his trust. Then, I'll take him down when he's unprepared. If anything happens, we'll have a chance to turn the situation around." "Wait," Taoist Yuan Yu said in a low voice. "Since we were both thrown into the Eye of the Sea by Shimori, we're on the same side. We might need each other's help in the future. If we don't work together to escape from this place, and instead kill each other, won't we make a fool of ourselves in front of Shimori?" From what the mummy said, it wasn't hard to deduce that he was a subordinate of King Poya who was betrayed by Shimori and thrown into the Eye of the Sea. However, after experiencing what King Shimori had done last time, they did not dare to believe such superficial words. They could only do their own thing and see who was better at acting. Yuan Yu and Fan Wujie had also become a lot more cunning now. They had to be decisive in everything they did, but they also had to leave some leeway, and the scale of it all depended on their scheming. Who can trust who in this dangerous zone of the CEI? Let's not talk about trust between us, something that hurts our relationship. Fan Wujie grinned viciously and said, "Consider yourself unlucky to have met us, you old fart. Give me everything you know, and if I'm in a good mood, I'll be merciful and grant you a chance to follow me. In the future, if you're lucky enough to escape this cage, you'll be able to eat and drink well in the outside world. Isn't that better than being trapped here? I'm going to search your soul. If you obey the will of heaven and know what's good for you, then stand there obediently. If you don't obey, I'll refine your soul with demonic fire." The mummy was so angry that he laughed coldly and said, "I haven't come out yet, and all the juniors in the outside world are so reckless. You're just an old fart who's struggling at death's door. How dare you talk to me like that?" Fan Wujie laughed coldly and stirred up the time-light true water. Before the tribulation of death power of the true water could disperse, the time-light true water turned into countless cursed patterns and swept out. Wherever it passed, everything would wither and die. Even the skeletons of the powerful innate living beings nearby, which had been immortal for tens of thousands of years, were instantly turned into ashes when they came into contact with the power of the tribulation of death power. Ha ha ha! The mummy's laughter sounded like two needles scratching against glass. It was extremely ear-piercing. He shouted angrily, "You're just a junior who's obtained a little bit of the tribulation of death power, and you dare to attack me? You haven't even touched the edge of the great Tao of destruction. The tribulation of destruction of the heavens, the tribulation of all techniques, the tribulation of Yuan Qi, the tribulation of void of matter, the tribulation of decay of time, the tribulation of liberation of void, the tribulation of destruction of doomsday, the tribulation of slaughter of living beings, the tribulation of reality and illusion reversal. Watch me use the power of the 9 tribulations to recreate the peerless power of Lady Rose, demonization of the ultimate ruins, and the creation of the embryonic form of the great Tao of destruction. The ultimate Tao solution, all techniques to dust." The mummy laughed madly and said, "Fool! The golden immortals who cultivate other great Taos are often on the verge of death. Being worn down to my level, they're naturally vulnerable. but I cultivate the great Tao of destruction. The closer I am to the end of my life, the closer I am to death, the closer I am to destruction. Although my power is beginning to weaken, my great Tao is more than 1,000,000 times stronger. The golden immortals who cultivate the great Tao of destruction are at their strongest when they are closest to destruction. I can kill you like killing a chicken. The mummy roared. I can crush you with one finger. Fan Wu Jie's eyes turned red. I, the Heavenly Lord. The Heavenly Lord. Fan Wu Jie roared, forcefully creating a new term, the Heavenly Lord. After all, he couldn't let his aura drop. Yuan Yu watched as the two of them were in a stalemate. Although they were shouting happily, their hands had no intention of making a move. Both of them were nurturing powerful auras and the aura of the great Tao. Their postures were getting more and more awesome, and their mouths were getting louder and louder. However, their hands were hesitant to make a move. As the aura of the great Tao of destruction on the mummy's body grew thicker and thicker, his existence was getting closer and closer to destruction, and he was getting weaker and weaker. If this continued, the mummy would be forced to create the embryonic form of the great Tao of destruction. Otherwise, the power of the 9 tribulations would go out of control and destroy him. Fan Wu Jie didn't dare to make a move, because the mummy was holding the power of the ultimate Tao of destruction against his head. The mummy didn't dare to make a move, because he himself couldn't control the power of the ultimate Tao of destruction. However, both of them were like arrows on a bowstring. If this continued, the power of destruction they controlled would be on the verge of losing control. It was hard to get off, and they could only fight to the death. Immortals who had cultivated to this level cherished their lives like gold. Fan Wu Jie had used up less than 1% of his lifespan. He had a lot of time and years to spend, and he didn't want to die together with someone. As for the mummy, it had persevered in this desperate and extreme environment for so many eons. If it wanted to die, it would have died millions of times. The fact that it could survive meant that its desire to live was even stronger than Fan Wu Jie's. At this time, old Taoist Yuan Yu's acting experience was revealed, leaving some leeway for him to turn things around, gave him some room to relax. Old Taoist Yuan Yu stepped forward and shouted angrily at Fan Wu Jie. Shao Wuxing, have you forgotten that your Sha family was slaughtered by the righteous path? Have you forgotten that you saved the demon ancestor of destruction, destroyed the heavens, and created the eternal devil realm? Fan Wu Jie had long wanted to find a way out of this embarrassing situation. He didn't care what old Taoist Yuan Yu was talking about. His body shook, and the peacock tail behind his head shook. His expression suddenly became rich, and his lips trembled. His eyes were filled with tears, as if he was remembering something unbearable in the past. He clenched his fists and dispersed the power of the death and decay calamity. He roared at the sky. Ah! Old Taoist Yuan Yu also said emotionally, Shao Wuxing, you don't have the right to be willful. Apologize to this fellow Taoist. He then turned to the mummy and said, if I'm not wrong, fellow Taoist only has the power for one attack, right? Cultivating the great Tao of destruction, it is true that the closer one gets to the edge of destruction, the closer one gets to the great Tao of destruction. However, the most dangerous enemy for us cultivators of the great Tao of destruction will always be ourselves. Fellow Taoist attack is indeed earth-shattering, and it can kill us here and now. But I'm afraid that if fellow Taoist wants to use this attack, he will first have to suffer the backlash, and his body will be destroyed, becoming the nutrients for the final Tao solution. If fellow Taoist continues to persist, I'm afraid that you won't be able to reverse the process. Without hesitation, the mummy dispersed the embryonic form of the final Tao solution in his hand. Even so, his aura was slightly weaker than before, but it was also because of this that the Tao connotation of the great Tao of destruction in his body had become stronger. The mummy sighed and said, we are all the direct descendants of the demon ancestor of destruction. So why do we have to kill each other and let that traitor Shemali take advantage of us? Fan Wu Jie clenched his fists tightly and knelt among the white bones. He said sincerely, Fellow Taoist, I was wrong. Before we rescue the demon ancestor of destruction and bring glory to the demon Tao of destruction, Wuxing doesn't have a right to die. We went through untold hardships to come to the depths of the ultimate, and we wanted to contact the core forces of the demon Tao of destruction, rescue the demon ancestor of destruction, and bring glory to the demon Tao of destruction. We were no longer bullied and hunted by the hypocrites of the righteous path and the true villains of the demon Tao of slaughter. After countless inquiries, we found out that there was an Azura tribe that still adhered to the great Tao of destruction, and they were planning something big. So, we went to contact them. Unexpectedly, Fan Wu Jie's tiger-like eyes were filled with tears, and he couldn't bear to look back. He said bitterly and bitterly, "That was actually a pawn of the righteous path and the demon Tao of slaughter to lure us here. A trap. Shemali is thick-skinned and black-hearted. Facing us, who are loyal to the demon ancestor of destruction, he slowly lured us into the trap while secretly contacting the righteous path. In this battle, only the two of us survived, and we were thrown into this sea of blood by him to torture us for eternity. Shemali, if I can get out of here alive, even if it takes me 3 lifetimes and 3 lifetimes, I will definitely kill you." Fan Wujie and the mummy seemed to have let go of the grudge between them in an instant. They held hands and looked at each other with tears in their eyes, and said at the same time, "Fellow Taoist, I was arrogant and domineering just now, and I have offended you, big brother." Fan Wujie held the mummy's hand, and he didn't mind the green corpse hair and the smell of the corpse. "Little brother, you are straightforward and bold, and you have the spirit of the demon Tao." The mummy pressed on his hand and said, "The demon Tao of destruction needs to have this kind of spirit of killing and seizing." Fan Wujie immediately took advantage of the situation and said, "Big brother, your attainment in the great Tao of destruction is still higher. I have cultivated for thousands of years, and I only managed to cultivate a little bit of the time-light true water, and I was contaminated by the great Tao of destruction's decline and death tribulations. But, big brother, your first move was the 9 tribulations of destruction, and you can even condense the embryonic form of the final solution. Compared to you, I am really a blockhead." The mummy comforted him. "The great Tao of destruction is broad and profound, and it is not something that can be achieved in a day and night. Moreover, I am still far from the final solution. Big brother, with this little ability, is because I've been trapped in this eye of the sea for countless years, and I have been worn down by the aura of the ruins of end day and night, and the great Tao of destruction is constantly being worn down, and I have been weakening since the beginning of the great Tao of destruction, and I am gradually approaching the essence of destruction. Before this, big brother, I have only comprehended a little bit of the Tao of the heaven's destruction tribulations, and I am not much stronger than you, little brother. Don't be fooled by my 9 tribulations, and it seems to be extremely powerful, but in fact, it is all because of the weakness of the essence of my existence and the special state of being on the verge of destruction. When I cultivate back to my original realm and indestructible godly body, it would be good if I can retain 1% of it. If the existence is too strong, it will hinder the communication with the great Tao of destruction, and I am afraid that only the king who comprehended the great Tao of destruction in the past, who is the manifestation of the great Tao of destruction, can jump out of this strange cycle. And for us golden immortals who cultivate the great Tao of destruction, it is extremely difficult to prove the Tao of Dara. Because the primitive universe is still in its ascendant phase, the power of the existence is incomparably strong, and it is suppressing our great Tao of destruction. But when the final calamity of the heavens approaches, when the ultimate devours all Taos and destroys the universe, it will be the best time for us to prove the Tao, and we can succeed in one go. As long as the destruction demon ancestor is trapped in the ultimate, there is no hope for us to achieve the Tao. In the end, we can only watch as our great Tao of destruction becomes stronger and stronger, and in turn, destroy ourselves. If we want to achieve the Tao, we can only save the destruction demon ancestor, The mummy pulled Fan Wujie's hand and said in a sincere and heartfelt tone, "Unfortunately, I cultivate the Khanate Tao seed, the great Tao of time." Fan Wujie sneered in his heart. Moreover, in a situation where the great Tao of destruction is not strong in the universe, you could be devoured by the great Tao of destruction that you cultivate at any time. When a universe is destroyed and the great Tao of destruction is countless times stronger, can you still be spared? In my opinion, the future of the great Tao of destruction is not good, and when Rogue breaks out of the seal, the first ones to be destroyed might be you destruction demon disciples. Fan Wujie knew that the mummy did not actually believe their previous performance, but through the exchange just now, it confirmed that Fan Wujie's great Tao of time had a trace of the aura of the great Tao of destruction, and this irrefutable proof of cultivating the great Tao of destruction made the mummy trust them a little more and used the chance to prove the Tao of Dara to tempt them. But this was a good thing, because the mummy's tone was filled with hope. In the ocean eye, the most precious thing was hope. Even if it was the hope of the villains, the destruction demon disciples, or the hope of destroying the entire world, because if there was no possibility of getting out, no hope of escaping, how could the mummy's mental state be so stable and still have the mood to rope them in? The mummy patted Fan Wujie's hand and said in a low voice, "Let's go. I will bring you to see the others." Over the years, there are many people who have been thrown into the ocean eye, and some of them have survived, including the old subordinates of our King Poya. We're planning something big. Everyone is working hard to save the destruction demon ancestor and to bring glory to our path. Are the two of you willing to join us? It stared at Fan Wujie and Taoist Yuan Yu with its withered eyes. Fan Wujie and Yuan Yu looked at each other and thought. Finally, we found the one. A group of old devils staying in this desperate place and working together to do one thing, other than escaping from this sea. Is there any other possibility? The two of them immediately said excitedly, "That's my wish. I don't dare to ask." Great Master Fajing said to King Shimali, "My king, you said that you caught 2 destruction demon disciples and stuffed them into the ocean eye. Are they these 2? Great Master Fajing took out 2 scrolls with Fan Wujie and Yuan Yu's true form sealed and showed them to King Shimali. King Shimali glanced at them and said impatiently, "It seems so." Great Master Fajing said anxiously, "My king, please look carefully. Is it true or not?" King Shimali said coldly, "Are you ordering me?" Great Master Fajing had to lower his head and said, "My king, I don't dare. It's just that these 2 are related to an important matter of our Buddhism, so I have to ask carefully. Otherwise, if Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva blames me, I won't be able to bear it." Hearing the name Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva, King Shimali waved his sleeves angrily and said, "How dare you say you are not threatening me?" He glared at Fajing for a long time, and then said with fear, "They were thrown into the ocean eye by me, and now they're probably only a pile of rotten bones. Also, they are destruction demon disciples, and they keep saying that they want to destroy the whole world. I am also defending justice and protecting the primitive world. Master, have you brought the aid I requested this time?" We, the Ashura tribe, endured the 10-fold reduction of our lifespan and defended the ultimate to prevent anyone from rescuing Demon Row. We had done a great service. Great Master Fajing suppressed the twitching of the corner of his eyes and said in a low voice, "My king, these are just 2 little Lord of Tao. One is the new talent of the Fan family, and the other is the leader of the Beauty Girl sect. Not to mention that they have nothing to do with the destruction demon path. Even if my king wants to kill them, you don't have to sacrifice 100,000 Azura warriors. If my king wants to kill them, he only needs to snap his fingers. The 100,000 Azura warriors that my king mentioned in the letter have almost been wiped out by the Blood Sea." "Why do you say that? Has the ancient city of Azura ever suffered any damage on our way here?" "My king, you are blackmailing us. I have protected the whole world, and the Ashura tribe has shed blood and tears. Don't you need anything in return? This is my aid to protect the ultimate and seal the destruction demon ancestor. This is justice, This is justice. This is justice. This is the aid of the whole world. Don't tell me that if the destruction demon ancestor is released, the Buddhism sect will not suffer any losses? Do you think that the righteous path can just watch from the side while my people shed blood and tears? They are the destruction demon disciples. I have a period of time taken by my king as proof. I am not the kind of person who kills innocent people to claim credit. My king, you are fishing. Fajin was also angry. The Azura king stood up coldly, and a powerful aura that made the Buddhism sect feel suffocated shrouded them. King Shimoli said coldly, "Sorcerer, you need evidence to speak." "I have evidence." Great Master Fajing said that I am fishing, but does that mean my blade is not sharp enough? Although I am not favored by the River Styx ancestor, I have come here on the orders of the River Styx ancestor to suppress the destruction demon ancestor. If you Buddhists have anything against me, you can talk to him. The ancestor is the most hospitable. The great Bodhisattva Tenera was invited by the ancestor to take up a position as the demon sect's deputy leader. "Sorcerer, are you also interested in taking up a position in the demon sect?" Shemali's tone was cold and threatening. Great Master Fajing kept wiping the cold sweat on his forehead and said with a trembling voice, "I dare not trouble the demon ancestor. The Buddhism sect will provide assistance this time. But that fan kid is related to a big matter of the Buddhism sect. My king, you have to let him out. When did you hear that there is a way out of the Blood Sea prison?" Shemali waved his sleeve and said, "If you want to save him, go save him. At most, I will not stop you." Fajing held a purple gold alms bowl and said, "In order to cross the ultimate, I came to the depths of the ultimate. I specially asked for the decree of Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva, asking the Western Paradise to give me this innate spirit treasure purple gold alms bowl. This alms bowl can freeze the 4 great realms, and even the destructive tribulation can't hurt it. You can throw it into the eye of the Blood Sea and let them out. But my magic power is not enough, and I can't use a part of this treasure's power. My king, please lend me a hand." "Approved." King Shimoli answered indifferently, waved his sleeve, and left. When he returned to the palace, King Shimoli sent a voice transmission secretly. "I've already sent them to the eye of the Blood Sea. There's a shortcut in the eye that leads to the ultimate. In recent years, I have sensed that the destruction demon disciples imprisoned in the ocean are not behaving well. This is a good chance to settle the score." "The Buddhists have come," King Shimoli said. "It seems that my letter was sent at the right time. They have borrowed an innate spirit treasure purple gold alms bowl. Inform the juniors about this. Don't let them fall into the trap. I'm only telling you that it is not so easy to deal with the 4 immortal slaying swords." The man on the other side said indifferently, "Why did the 4 immortal slaying swords of Tong Tian return to Ro's hands? Not even a ghost would believe that Tong Tian can't control the 4 immortal slaying swords. There must be a big plan behind this. It is said that Tong Tian and the demon ancestor above us are fighting for the position of the end of Tao. Maybe this is a chess move, using Ro's hand to hold back the slaughtered demon ancestor in the end of Tao. You are plotting against the 4 immortal slaying swords. Although the great ancestor has given his permission, the great ancestor is too playful. This is not a good thing for you. If the Buddhists and Taoists want to know what happened in the chaos, then let them in. I advise you not to touch the 4 immortal slaying swords. It is not something we can pry into. Also, our demonic path has a spy by Fan Wujie's side. You can help him in secret." The voice was a little hesitant. "That spy is very strange. I can't see it clearly. It might be the work of the slaughter demon ancestor. Don't do anything rash." Chapter 1249. Everyone, there's no need to wait. Author Chen Ishi, author of Despair, Fantasy World Transmigration. Talk about the reason why the New Year's update wasn't good enough. Currently typing. Please wait a moment. After the content is updated, please refresh the page to get the latest update. Chapter 1250. The mummy brought Fan Wujie and Yuan Yu deeper into the Bone Mainland. There were 5 towering mountain ranges at the edge of the Bone Mainland. and they were formed by King Poya's 5 fingers when she lifted up her old subordinates. The 5 Bone Mountain ranges stood at the edge of the sky like pillars that supported the heavens. When Fan Wujie and Taoist Yuan Yu fell from the sky, they landed in a huge valley near the meridian of the Bone Mainland. The vitality-corroding blood mist in the upper half of the eye of the ocean had condensed into the blood river true water on the heavenly pillars formed by the 5 fingers. It flowed along the veins on King Poya's palms, forming streams of blood. Finally, at the tip of the thumb, which was also the valley on the wrist, it flowed along the veins on the wrist and fell into the blood whirlpool below. Fan Wujie was shocked when he saw the blood flowing down from the 5 heavenly pillars, flowing along the veins on the palm, and finally pouring down into the meridian, forming a huge waterfall. This was just a part of the power left behind by Dara's body. If that was the case, how powerful was Dara when he was at his peak? He could probably crush countless Dao monarchs like him with just a single finger. The mummy brought them along the valley and the blood river, all the way to the palm. The blood river flowed along the valley and split the entire palm into 2. Fan Wujie and the others stood by the river and looked into the distance, only to see that the blood river was boundless, and they could not see the other side. If they had not seen the entire Bone Mainland when they fell from the eye of the ocean, it would be hard for them to imagine that this vast sea of blood was actually only the width of a single blood river. Fan Wujie could not help but ask, "How wide is this blood river?" The mummy said, "Do you know that there used to be a Skyfall River in the Void Continent? The Skyfall River is said to be 800 miles long, and few people have ever traveled it. During the Void era, the water that flowed in the Skyfall River was the essence of the Kuei water, which was formed by the heavenly true water. The water that flowed in this blood river was also the filthy blood water that was formed by the blood river true water. It could corrode all living things and breed devils." Someone set off from the riverbank and flew for 5 years. Even after flying for 8,000 miles, he still couldn't see the other side. Fan Wujie sucked in a breath of cold air, and a chill ran down his spine. The might of the Dao monarch was renowned throughout the ages, and his Fan clan was one of the aristocratic clans that ruled over an entire realm. Their eyesight was not shallow, and if it was ordinary water, forget about 8,000 miles. Even if it was 80,000 miles, or even 800 million miles, he wouldn't care. However, what flowed in the blood river was the most filthy blood that could pollute an entire sea region with a single drop. Those who could survive after falling into the ocean, even if their cultivation was not as high as theirs, were not that far off. Such a powerful being had spent 5 years to fly 8,000 miles in the blood river. How could people not be terrified when they thought about it? The few of them had been walking along the banks of the blood river for 3 years. From time to time, Fan Wujie could hear some stirring noises in the blood river, or he could see huge shadows flashing across the river. Finally, one day, he saw a black back that looked like a small island flashing across the surface of the river, far away from where he could see it. That incomparably powerful fleshly body was not damaged at all by the filthy energy that was corroding the blood river. It raised huge waves, and the filthy blood water slapped towards both sides of the river. On the shore, there were immortal bones that emitted an awe-inspiring divine light. In all the realms, these bones were precious materials that could be used to craft immortal items. Fan Wujie even saw a golden skull that was emitting an inextinguishable divine light. That person's cultivation, when he was alive, was definitely not weaker than him. However, as soon as the blood waves washed over it, it fell into the blood river. The boundless, filthy blood water slowly tainted the immortal essence. The skull only lasted for 2 breaths before it was tainted by the divine light and sank into the blood river, where it was suppressed and consumed. Fan Wujie's expression was very ugly, and the shock in his heart was indescribable. This was the first time he had witnessed the power of Dara. Originally, he thought that he was only 1 step away from Dara, but now he realized that the gap between him and Dara was so huge that it could not be measured. Unlike the last time when he saw the afterimages of the Chaos Fiend gods fighting in the chaos, this time he was standing on top of Dara's dead body. The corpse of a grand celestial would be able to stand in the eye of the blood sea, which was like an apocalyptic calamity. He would be able to raise his hand to the heavens and carve out a pure land. His palm would become a continent, and the runes on his palm would form a river of blood. The monsters that were born within the river of blood would be able to destroy the corpse of a Tao Lord with the slightest ripple. The immortal nature of a gold immortal was far from being immortal in front of this power. Fan Wu Jie had seen things that were many times stronger than this, just like how he had seen the river of time where the cosmic true water gathered. It was a river of time that flowed from the past to the future, a river of time that encompassed everything. It flowed endlessly, and the slightest ripple could push countless worlds into the future, wiping away all traces of life and existence. It was a power that was so great that it could not be looked at directly. But just like a tiny living being in the galaxy, looking up at the sea of stars, even if he was moved by this majestic power, he could not feel it directly. Fan Wu Jie could only imagine the power of the river of time. But now, he looked at the giant demon in the blood river, the mountain-like fish that leaped out of the water, and he was truly facing this incredible power. Its gigantic body filled up the entire world, making Fan Wu Jie look as tiny as an ant. It leaped out of the blood river and glided for thousands of miles before smashing heavily onto the surface of the river. It opened its huge mouth and swallowed the endless amount of filthy blood, then spat it out from the breathing hole on its back. The blood was transformed by it, turning into the filthy black water that rose into the sky. The mummy's expression changed dramatically, and it said, "Not good. The huge amount of black water that this giant leviathan spat out will rise into the sky, and in 3 days, it will turn into the filthy rain that will cover an area of 300,000 miles. The filthy black water will pollute everything, and it is extremely poisonous. Everyone, get out of this area." This is the demon born from the blood river. Fan Wu Jie's expression was extremely ugly, and Taoist Yuan Yu had fled far away in the blink of an eye. The land of bones was filled with a strong, murderous aura. Although King Poya had created a pure land that was not shrouded by the vitality-corroding blood mist and weakened the destructive power of the blood ocean eye, there were still traces of destructive power that seeped into the land. Using magic and casting divine abilities here was 10,000 times more difficult than in the 10,000 worlds. The great Tao of destruction did not need to mention anything else. Just the tiny bit of essence that the mummy had shown was enough to create the tribulation of decay of time. All existences will lose their lifespan and die unavoidably, and they will weaken along with the power of the tribulation of decay of time. The tribulation of nirvana, all great Taos, spells, and divine abilities will weaken until they die, and the final solution to the great Tao of destruction. The true power of the great Tao of destruction was far more than that. As a great Tao that was destined to destroy all existences, wherever the great Tao of destruction came into contact with, the natural energies would gradually weaken, and the pure spirit energies would become inert, shortening one's lifespan. All living beings would die prematurely, and the power of their divine abilities would gradually weaken. It could be said that the great Tao of destruction was born to restrain all existences. Anything that was based on the foundation of Taiji would gradually be shaken by the great Tao of destruction, and its essence would be weakened until it was completely obliterated. Therefore, when Fan Wu Jie entered the depths of the bottomless ruin, he realized that the power of his divine abilities and spells would be weakened by 100 times, and the power of his divine abilities would be weakened by 100 times in the depths of the bottomless ruin. Multiplying the two, he would have to spend 10,000 times more effort to be able to reach the level of the divine abilities in the 10,000 worlds. Only spells and divine abilities that contain the great Tao of destruction would not be affected, and would even become stronger under the support of the great Tao of destruction. Therefore, for a Tao Lord who could teleport 10,000 miles with a single thought in the 10,000 worlds, Fan Jie had to use all his strength in order to run 300,000 miles in 3 days. When the three of them finally ran out of the range of the filthy black feather, they panted for a moment at the edge. Taoist Yuan Yu was out of breath, and it looked like the foundation of his magic power had been shaken by the great Tao of destruction. Fan Jie fared slightly better. The cosmic light true water had an extremely high essence, and the great Tao of destruction had to expend a lot of energy to weaken its existence. The mummy was on its last breath, and its exposed bones had withered a lot, making it look even more vulnerable. Now, its aura had fallen to the level of a celestial immortal, Hanba. However, Fan Jie did not believe that this was all they had displayed. If the mummy only had the power of a celestial immortal, it would have been destroyed by the great Tao of destruction long ago. In its current state, it was suppressing the great Tao of destruction, which was slowly wearing away at its very foundation. If Fan Jie thought that this was all it had, then it would have attacked with full force, ignoring the fact that it would be destroyed by the great Tao of destruction and unleash the 9 tribulations of destruction, or even the 10th tribulation of destruction. It could cause a disaster that was countless times more terrifying than the full power attack of the Leviathan beast. It wouldn't be difficult for it to drag thousands of Tao Lords down with it. This mummy was extremely bizarre. The weaker its aura was, the closer it was to destruction, and the more terrifying it was. If it was on its last breath, and only its bones were left, then its indestructible fiend god body would be reduced to dust with a single tug, then it would be in an unprecedentedly terrifying state. This meant that in order to fight against the incredibly powerful great Tao of destruction, it was in a state of extreme weakness. Its foundation of the Taiji was no longer even worth mentioning. Once it attacked, it would be earth-shattering. At the very least, it would be able to unleash a complete ultimate Tao solution, which would give it a fighting chance against Dara. As for the wretched old Taoist who called himself Xingyang Zi, Fan Jie had never seen through him. He was a very mysterious man, and since he was able to survive the depths of the ultimate ruins, he was definitely not as simple as he appeared to be. Fan Jie turned his head back to look. The most filthy black rain had finally fallen from the sky. Within the black, filthy black water, the piles of corpses and skeletons of sentient life forms were instantly polluted by the black water, turning into rotten mud. Fan Jie's expression was cold and indifferent. He finally knew where the rotten soil on the white-bone continent came from. Are you shocked? Taoist Yuan Yu sighed when he saw this. If you saw the worlds that were pulled into the ultimate, you would be even more shocked. The countless living beings in each world, the powerful immortal gods, even the remnants of the sentient life forms, the lowly Hotian life forms, even the grass and trees, ignorant ants, they all struggled and died in the calamity of the great Tao of destruction. You can see the wreckage of one world after another, like the tombstones of all living beings, stretching as far as you can see. You can see countless skeletons, more skeletons than you've ever seen in your entire life, turn to dust. The vitality-corroding blood sea is only a small part of it. Do you know why I said that the blood sea is a great creation? Yuan Yu sighed and said, when the wreckage of the worlds that fell into the ultimate ruins fell into the blood sea, the boundless vitality, corroding blood mist would gradually weaken the fetal membranes of the worlds, causing a great disaster. It would wipe out all the living beings within, leaving behind the strongest, most tenacious, most ordinary, and most miraculous living beings of that world. The wreckage of the worlds will be pulled by the blood sea eye and fall towards the blood sea whirlpool. Then it would pass by the ancient Azura city. That would be the feast of the Azura race. They would invade that weakened world, break the fetal membranes of that world, slaughter their way in, plunder, slaughter, and destroy. They would destroy everything, plunder the remaining essence of that world, and feed on the remaining living beings there. This is a great creation. This is why I never suspected that the Azura race was the one who destroyed the demon ancestor. But I still underestimated how shameless life can be in order to survive. The demon race of destruction has even betrayed destruction itself. In the end, the leftovers eaten by the Azura race, including existences that even the Azura race finds troublesome, would be thrown here. They would eat the corpses clean, and the wreckage that was not eaten clean would all come here. The Blood Sea Eye is where the Azura race disposes of their trash. Then the weak living beings and the relatively weak worlds in the upper half would be destroyed. And the corpses of powerful existences and even more tenacious living beings would be lucky enough to fall on this pure land that Poya King has raised up, forming the endless skeletons and wreckage we see now. The demons in the Blood Sea are those living beings that even the Azura race cannot kill, and the Blood Sea I cannot destroy. They are so tenacious that they can survive in this forbidden land, in the filthy blood water, and even adapt to the environment here. Life has its own way out. The mummy also said, faintly, that should be the life that was brought here when the outside world fell into the ultimate, or even the descendants of the Khanate life forms that fell into the ultimate when the primordial world was shattered. It should be the descendant of a Kuan Pung that transformed into a giant Kuan in the Blood Sea. The Blood River, true water, is filthy, but it is also the mother nest of life, containing the supreme power of life. Its opposite is the innate true water, the blue sky yellow springs, which contains the supreme power of purification. Legend has it that in the primordial world, the Blood River, true water, gathered to form a boundless blood sea, giving birth to the first living beings. It even gave birth to a supreme existence, the slaughtered demon ancestor. Therefore, the giant Kuan swallowed the filthy blood water, absorbed the life force within, and turned the filthy blood water into the filthy black water that is even more filthy and destructive. It can be said that this huge blood sea is its food, and just now, it was full and excreting into the sky. Hearing this, Fan Wu Jie's face pulled 3 black lines, and he said, "Luckily, we ran fast, or wouldn't we be drowning in its excrement?" The living beings in the Blood Sea are not necessarily strong, but those that can survive in this kind of environment must have some strong points, and they all have some strange abilities, such as the giant Kuan's ability to swallow filthy blood water and excrete filthy black water. The mummy continued, "The living beings in the Blood Sea are very valuable. If you kill some of them, you can take them back to exchange for many valuable things." Kill that giant Kuan? Fan Wu Jie couldn't help but shiver. If we were in the outside world, it would not be too difficult to kill it. But in this dangerous land of the ultimate ruins, with the unique environment of the Blood Sea and the giant Kuan's strange magic power, killing such a strange existence is a little too risky. That giant Kuan is a relatively strong existence in the Blood Sea. There are also some weaker monsters in the Blood Sea. As long as we find their weakness, it is not difficult to kill them. Otherwise, how do you think we survived in this dangerous land? Do you really think that living beings can live without food and water? The mummy sneered. Fan Wu Jie glanced at the piles of bones nearby, his meaning self-evident. The mummy was furious. "What do you think I am? Dogs and vultures that feed on scavengers?" Old Taoist Yuan Yu thought further, and he said hesitantly, "The giant Kuan is not the strongest, so there are monsters even stronger than the giant Kuan?" The mummy did not answer, but continued to urge them on. After walking for another 10 years, Fan Wu Jie finally understood why the mummy did not answer him. In the distance, there was a huge Kuan corpse floating in the Blood Sea, forming a peninsula that was about 400 miles long. The giant Kuan only had half of its body left, and its tail, which was in the Blood Sea, seemed to have been bitten off by something. Compared to the giant Kuan they saw just now, this one could only be considered a cub, but such a terrifying sentient life form was still killed by the monsters in the Blood Sea. No wonder the mummy said that the Kuan was not the scariest creature in the Blood Sea. On the carcass of the giant Kuan, they could vaguely see some moving human figures, looking like parasites on the carcass. Fan Wu Jie was instantly excited. This was the second living creature they had encountered in the Eye of the Sea, and it was a group of them. It seemed that the land of bones was not as hopeless as they thought, and there were still some people who survived. When Fan Wu-jie got closer, he could clearly see the figures on the carcass. They were cultivators wearing a strange kind of leather raincoat, and the leather coat covered their bodies tightly. The animal skin used to make the coat came from a strange creature, and the reason why they could tell that it was leather was because when these people sewed the coat, they kept the animal skin as intact as possible. They could even see the creature's eyebrows and limbs through the broken skin. It was a three-legged beetle that looked like a turtle. The auras of these people were not strong, and many of them were only heaven immortals, and some had just become immortals. Even though there were one or two golden immortals and Taoists, their auras were shockingly weak, and they were even weaker than heaven immortals. Stop looking. In 1,000 years, you will become like that, the mummy said sarcastically. Observing the auras of these heaven immortals and a land of bones under their feet, the whole blood sea seemed to have a faint connection, and without exception, they were all creatures who cultivated the fiend Tao of destruction. Instead, it was the two Taoists who had the aura of the myriad heavens. Although they also cultivated the fiend Tao of destruction, they could see that their current cultivation method was in conflict with their own Tao foundation. Fan Wu-jie said in shock, "These heaven immortals are natives born here. Although the lifespan here passes by a little faster, the resources here are very rich, and it is equivalent to a small primitive continent, so it is not difficult to cultivate here. If you cultivate the great Tao of destruction, you will get twice the result with half the effort. Even if the environment is a little dangerous, the orthodoxy can still be passed down, so it is not strange that there are natives here. We did not see them at the beginning, so it should be because the place where we fell is at the edge of the whole continent." Taoist Yuan Yu analyzed seriously. The natives on the Kuan's carcass were all dressed in strange black leather clothes, and they stood on the part of the carcass that reached into the blood river, staring at it with all their attention. Hearing Fan Wu-jie and the others' loud words, many people looked at them with unfriendly eyes. The mummy laughed dryly and said, "They are fishing, don't disturb them." "Fishing?" Fan Wu-jie frowned and said, "I have heard of the Kuan, but are they the aquatic insects that shoot shadows? They are just as stupid as mosquitoes, and they can survive in the blood river treacherous ground?" The mummy trembled when it heard the word mosquitoes, and its reaction was even bigger than when it saw the giant Kuan. His face darkened, and he said in a hoarse voice, "You look down on mosquitoes?" He laughed coldly and said strangely, "You dare to look down on mosquitoes? Do you know why I look like a mummy? Because my divine blood was sucked dry by the mosquitoes, and it was not just once. Every time I regenerated my divine blood, I was sucked dry, and in the end, I had to cut off my blood marrow and give up the ability to produce blood. In this Poya ruins, no one dares to say that they are not afraid of mosquitoes. Kid, you have guts. The greatest ferocious creature in the blood river, the six-winged blood mosquito. If you're not afraid, why do you think people would go fishing for mosquitoes? I really can't wait to see your fate after being sucked dry." The mummy chuckled. Yuan Yu shrunk his neck and said to Fan Wu-jie in a low voice, "Little Fan, you are too arrogant. Don't be fooled by a tiny mosquito. It is the greatest ferocious creature in the blood river, treacherous creature. Among the mosquitoes in the blood river, treacherous creature, there was even a famous Dara, the mosquito Taoist. He was a fierce person who dared to go against the slaughtering demon ancestor. He ate the body of the divine mother of turtle spirit from the ancient Jie sect, and even the treasure of the Western sect, the 12th grade golden lotus, he ate 3 grades. In this blood river, treacherous creature, those who can survive in the ultimate are not the strongest. Who knows how many Dara's bones are buried here, and how many golden immortals' corpses are scattered everywhere. Those who really survive in the ultimate are usually the most inconspicuous and tenacious creatures, such as insects. In this ultimate, weakness and ignorance are not the obstacles to survival. Arrogance is," Yuan Yu said earnestly. "If you want to get out of here alive, little Fan, put down your status as a Taoist lord and learn from the weakest and most ordinary beings here. If they can survive in the ultimate, they will understand the laws here better than you. Fan Wujie hesitated for a moment, then climbed onto the Kuin's corpse, ready to learn about the laws of survival in the ultimate. Those local people with low cultivation bases were wearing simple and crude leather clothes, carefully hiding by the shore of the Kuin's corpse. Although they were fishing, none of them carried fishing hooks or rods. Instead, they were holding bows and arrows, or strange-looking crossbows and slingshots. They carefully kept their shadows at least 1 foot away from the blood river. They stared intently at the river. The mummy explained in a low voice, "Since you know about the Kuin, you should know that it has a strange ability to shoot shadows with sand. The Kuin here should be a species that survived after falling into the blood river, treacherous creature from the outside world. They mutated to adapt to the filthy blood river, treacherous creature, while still retaining their innate ability to shoot shadows with sand. But what they shoot is not the ordinary poisonous sand that can only poison mortals in the outside world, but the poisonous sand at the bottom of the blood river, treacherous creature. Even the locusts themselves can only preserve a mouthful of venomous sand, which they rely on to prey on existences countless times stronger than themselves. The locusts here are still so weak that they can't even withstand a single blow. Any immortal can easily kill them, but their venomous sand can even poison immortals to death. The lifespan of the horseshoe beetles is very short. Their only desire in life is to dive into the blood river to find the most poisonous sand, and then poison a powerful creature to death. From there, they can reproduce for the first time, and also the last time. Using the flesh and blood of that powerful creature, they can reproduce billions of horseshoe beetles. Most of their offspring become food for the more powerful monsters of the blood river, treacherous creature, especially before they collect that mouthful of poisonous sand. 90% of the Kuin have already become food for the monsters of the blood river, treacherous creature. But the Kuin that collects the poisonous sand will undergo a strange change, and they will gain immunity to the poison. This ability is also inherited by the Kuin's skin. The poison of the poisonous sand at the bottom of the blood river, treacherous creature, is the most insignificant aftermath of the great Tao of destruction. So in theory, the skin of the Kuin can resist the erosion of the great Tao of destruction, but the Kuin is too weak. Their ability can only protect the weakest life, and they can't even protect the infants of humans and other intelligent races, let alone powerful immortals and Tao lords. However, there is a mutated breed of the Kuin. The death tribulation of Timelight Truewater is also a type of great Tao of destruction. If the Kuin is lucky enough to take a mouthful of poisonous sand containing the tribulation power of death, such as the worldly dust sand of the Six Desires or the dust sand, their mutated immunity will allow them to resist the poison of time, allowing them to break through their short lifespan and live even longer. The Kuin that lives even longer will feed on the poisonous sand at the bottom of the blood river, treacherous creature, using the poison of time until it can poison a celestial immortal or even a Tao lord to improve its immunity. 100-year Kuin is able to protect an immortal against the aftermath of the great Tao of destruction. 1,000-year Kuin is able to protect a celestial immortal, and at the Tao lord level, only the skin of a 10,000-year Kuin is able to effectively resist the great Tao of destruction. Thus, the natives and prisoners of the Poya relic all yearn for a Kuin skin that could protect them. That's why the business of Kuin was established here. Look at the Kuin. They use their own flesh and blood to lure the Kuin. The Kuin is attracted by the irresistible instinct to reproduce, and so they shoot out that mouthful of poisonous sand from the blood river, treacherous creature. The Kuin's bodies are extremely small, and when they are in the blood river, they look like specks of dust to the eyes of a Tao lord. Only when they spit out the poisonous sand will their bodies expand millions of times in size. That's when the Kuin shoots out the poisonous sand. This is a competition of reaction speed. If the Kuin isn't able to dodge that mouthful of poisonous sand, he'll end up as nourishment for the Kuin to reproduce. No one will be able to save his corpse, because the Kuin is selfish. Without the corpses of powerful creatures to nourish the countless Kuan, how will they be able to acquire the precious Kuan's skin in the future? That's why I look at them. They're all so focused that they're afraid they'll be too slow. The corpse laughed coldly as it pointed at the Kuan. When Fan Wujia heard the corpse's words, he looked at the Kuan. He saw an incomparable level of focus, because anyone who wasn't focused enough had already died. The tiny Kuan worms were insignificant bugs in the universe, but here, they had become an incredibly valuable and dangerous resource. In fact, they had even become a specialized business. These weak natives were insignificant, but they were able to use their intelligence and focus to survive in the endless, a place where even Tao Lords had a slim chance of surviving. They had their own laws of survival. The endless was a place where even the most powerful fiend gods were buried, but it was also a place where even the weakest of bugs could survive. As long as one respected its laws, it would give anyone a chance. The Kuan's laws were speed and focus. They had to be faster than others and more focused than others. Chapter 1251. This is the most famous fishing ground of the Blood River. The mummy stared at the carcass in the Blood River and said, "This carcass has been polluted by the black water in its body, causing most of the materials on its body to be polluted. Even its flesh is filled with filth, and the demonic creatures in the Blood River are not willing to eat it. But fortunately, the worms don't care about it. The Kuan corpse has created a breeding ground for the venomous worms in the Blood River. This Kuan corpse has been here for 100,000 years, so it should have raised many 10,000-year-old venomous worms. If I were you, I would think of a way to get some venomous worms." "There is no need," Fan Wujia said. "Our main goal is to escape from here. We should try our best to avoid unnecessary trouble." "Escape from here?" The mummy grinned and said sarcastically, "How many years do you plan to spend? Whether it is 1,000 years or 10,000 years, I will crawl out of here." Fan Wujia said with determination, "Then you should live on first. If you want to escape from here, do you think you can do it with your poor appearance?" The mummy glanced at Fan Wujia and said with disdain. Fan Wujia was so angry that he laughed. "You are a piece of trash that no one would want even if you peeled off your skin, and you dare to laugh at me for being poor?" Yuan saw the disdain in Fan Wujia's heart and said with a bitter smile, "Take out your heavenly dwelling treasure first." Fan Wujia casually took out his cloud palace abode and took out a string of large moon soul spirit beads. Every single one of them was a high-grade profound bead that was nurtured by a 10,000-year-old clam. Whether it was used to refine treasures or to concoct pills, they were all top-notch high-grade beads. In the Brahma heaven realm, these beads were commonly used to exchange materials between almighty experts, and they were usually measured in dough. One moon soul bead was worth billions, and it was enough to exchange for a blessed land with a mid-sized spirit vein, or 1 drop of universe true water, or 50 drops of sky true water. As one of the most powerful families in the Brahma heaven realm, Fan Wujia's moon soul beads were also of extraordinary quality. As soon as he took out the spirit pearl, it immediately emitted a faint radiance, as if it was a small silver moon. However, Fan Wujia felt that something was wrong. This was because the divine object was self-concealing. For it to emit such a bright radiance meant that the spiritual object was not in a state of restraint, but rather it was in a state of power. It could not be maintained for long, and this was a kind of harm to the spiritual object itself. A well-preserved moon soul bead should look like a large pearl at first glance, and only when it reflected the moonlight would it shine. Only by looking closely would one be able to see that touching spiritual essence. It shouldn't be as bright as it was now, as if someone was injecting spiritual power into it and slightly activating it. The mummy snatched the moon soul bead from Fan Wujia's hand, threw it on the ground, stepped on it, and said, "Is this the treasure you brought with you? This is a spirit item from the outside world? Trash, all trash." Fan Wujia snorted coldly, thinking that the mummy had lost his mind. At this moment, the mummy raised his dirty and skinny calf, gesturing Fan Wujia to look at his feet. The moon soul bead was crushed by the mummy, and a layer of light silver powder floated up when the wind blew. It emitted a faint silver radiance and scattered, as if the bright moonlight had suddenly sprinkled over the earth. Fan Wujie revealed a cold smile, but Taoist Yuan Yu sighed and brushed away the layer of silver radiance on the surface, revealing the grayish-white powder underneath. It looked like the lowest quality pearl powder in the mortal world. The spiritual opportunity has long been eaten away, Taoist Yuan Yu explained. The great Tao of destruction of the ruins of End is even more powerful than the cosmic light true water. What kind of treasure can isolate it? All the spirit items with strong spiritual opportunity in the outside world will be corroded and destroyed by the great Tao of destruction. Now, the things we brought from the outside world will be destroyed soon, and even the treasure itself will not be able to hold on for long. Yuan Yu raised his chin and gestured to the two Tao lords who were fishing on the Kuan corpse rock. You were looking down on us just now, saying that we have nothing on us, that we are poor, and that we are covered in dirty skin. After 100 years, I'm afraid we will not even have a skin to cover ourselves with. Brother, what you mean is that you should at least get a few pieces of worm skin, so that when all the things on your body are melted away, at least you will have something to cover yourself with. Yuan Yu patted the mummy's shoulder, and the mummy sneered, Don't listen to the words of good people. Dogs bite Lu Chunyang. Fan Wujie's face alternated between shades of red and green. He looked towards his abode in the Cloud Palace, and sure enough, the heavenly abode within had already begun to show signs of decline. Fan Wujie pinched his fingers and calculated. Even if he sealed off all the aura of the heavenly abode, if he didn't use the Timelight True Water to protect it, this heavenly abode wouldn't last for another 60 years. Fan Wujie sighed, and he was no longer stubborn. Is there no spiritual ingredient that can resist the corrosion of the great Tao of destruction? There is. The mummy glanced greedily at the cosmic light true water that had turned into a time barrier next to Fan Wujie, pointed at it, and laughed strangely. Isn't the cosmic light true water next to you? But when your lifespan is up and your existence is slowly being destroyed by the great Tao of destruction, will you still think that it is more important than your life? Of course, my life is more important. Fan Wujie sighed. And then you will become like me. The mummy stretched out its hand and calmly showed itself. Its skinny body was covered with wrinkled skin. Its skin was even more wrinkled and coarser than the skin of an old man that had been dried for 300 years. All external objects that could withstand the destructive tribulations have been used up. All that is left is this ghostly appearance. So, in the returning ruins, the materials that can resist the calamity of destruction are the most valuable, right? No matter how good the other spiritual ingredients are, they will be destroyed by the calamity of destruction in the blink of an eye. The mummy very naturally replied with a yes, but suddenly felt that something was not right. It turned around and saw Fan Wujie and Taoist Yuan Yu behind it, swallowing their saliva and staring greedily at its body. A 10,000-year-old skin can become a treasure. What if a supreme grade innate was born with the ability to resist the calamity of destruction? Yuan Yu's eyes were red as he carefully touched the mummy's wrinkled skin, which was covered with moldy spots and green hair. Then, it would be a priceless treasure. You have been tortured by the great Tao of destruction for countless years, and no amount of treasures would be enough for you. Yet, you managed to survive with this skin, which shows that this is the true treasure of the returning ruins. If you can take it off and make it into a magical robe, it might be as good as Dara's treasure of avoiding calamity. Fan Wujie rubbed hard on the skin of the mummified corpse, then blew upwards. The dried green hair of the mummified corpse rose into the air and sprinkled all over the ground. Invincible to all tribulations, Yuan Yu praised. At the same time, he crouched on the ground and swept the green hair that Fan Wujie had wiped off. At the same time, he cursed with a heartache. What a wastrel! This is the green fur that grew from the tribulation avoiding supreme treasure. I think it contains the supreme Tao of destruction. This is the product of the attack of the great Tao of destruction, which can only be produced by destroying your precious skin. I can feel the supreme calamity power contained in it. I am afraid that it is a cursed treasure that hides an extremely terrible, ominous power that can kill Tao lords and gold immortals. This green hair is full of ominous power, and it can be used to make a supreme treasure of the fiend Tao. I know of a type of curse soul banner that can be used as the main material, and there's also a secret technique called the 7 Stars Big Dipper Life Chopping Man that can be used to refine people. Look at these beautiful patterns. Fan Wu Jie looked at the wrinkles on the mummy's arm and praised. These are the Tao marks left behind by the attack of the great Tao of destruction, and they contain the supreme secret of the calamity power of destruction. If you can copy all the Tao marks on this skin, you can definitely create a supreme divine ability of the fiend Tao of destruction, or a supreme secret technique of avoiding calamity. We have been walking with this peerless treasure for so long, yet we failed to recognize it. Yuan Yu looked at the skin on the mummy with a terrifying gaze. Even the mummy, who had lived for countless eons, and perhaps even longer, was a little flustered. Looking at these two shameless people, its eyes began to turn red, and there was a faint, murderous glint in them. The mummy had no choice but to release the aura of the 9 tribulations as one, the ultimate Tao solution to calm them down. Fan Wu Jie felt the horror of the universe being destroyed and the great Tao collapsing. He shuddered and woke up. He shook his head regretfully, as if he was sighing at his own eyesight. Yuan Yu was even more reluctant. I have never recognized a true treasure. My friend, you have a supreme treasure by my side, but I only saw your ugly performance, confused by the appearance of the green-haired mummy. Treasure gone. Treasure gone. Yuan Yu was heartbroken, thumping his chest and stamping his feet. He said, "Divine things hide themselves. I have always been proud of my eyesight, but such a huge treasure was right next to me, and I needed you to remind me before I could notice it." The mummy was a little flustered, not knowing what to ask. Fan Wu Jie didn't feel anything when he looked at the shining human skin, but when Yuan Yu looked at him with the same burning gaze, he couldn't help but feel flustered. He hurriedly scolded, "What treasure? Treasure? This is my skin. You two shameless people. How dare you even think about my human skin? You are not worthy of being my son." Old Taoist Yuan Yu and Fan Wu Jie comforted him. "My friend, don't worry. We were just blinded for a moment, and our eyes were blinded by the treasure. Actually, we didn't mean it. Don't worry, my friend." Old Taoist Yuan Yu even swore to the heavens that if he dared to covet the mummy's human skin, he would be struck by lightning and suffer 5 thunders, and he would never have the chance to attain Dara. Only then was the mummy calmed down, but it still looked at the two with vigilance. He was sure that if there was a chance to rip off his skin, these two scum would definitely not let it go. On the other side, Yuan Yu and Fan Wu Jie were exchanging elbows and bumping into each other as they secretly transmitted their voices to each other. "Why do you look so impatient? Make it wary. I won't even have the chance to shave off all its green fur. Later, I will create an opportunity for you, and you will scrape off all the green mold on its body. We will split it 50-50. Deal. I can't pluck off its skin, but I can still scrape off its green fur, right? That is definitely a treasure manifested from the Tao of destruction, and it has endless uses. An old corpse that survived the endless tribulations. Even if its fur is green, it is still a treasure. I think its skin is comparable to the skin of a 1,000,000-year-old worm. Not just a 1,000,000-year-old worm. I think not even a 1,000,000-year-old worm can grow such a good skin. What a pity. What a pity. This treasure has a strong tendency to self-destruct, and sooner or later, it will be destroyed along with the mummy by the Tao of destruction. An ancient treasure, destroyed in a day, it is rare to see it again. What a pity. If I can get that skin and wear it, why would I need to fear the harsh environment of the ultimate? I can come and go as I please. Coming to the ultimate will be like going home. The people here are all treasures, and their words are pleasant to listen to. Fan Wu Jie and Yuan Yu let their imaginations run wild, and Yuan Yu is filled with murderous intent. This is just an innate living being, and according to what the mummy said, there are many of its kind that have fallen into this place at the same time as it, and are constantly being worn down by the Tao of destruction. If I can skin them all, I can use their human skin to craft a marvelous acquired spiritual treasure of the fiend Tao. If I can skin the body of the Poya, great Azura king in the ocean, I too. Thinking of his majestic appearance in a human skin magical robe, Yuan Yu had to quickly stop his imagination and said to the three pure ones Daozu with a sigh, "Ancestors, I am a disciple of the fiend Tao, and my heart is tied to the mystic door, but I have never had such wild thoughts in my heart. It is all the contamination of the fiend Tao, the shameless contamination of the fiend Tao. I am a disciple with a pure heart, and when I go back, I will recite the Golden Court 10,000 times to restrain myself." What a pity for that extraordinary treasure. In the sea of blood, Adara had sacrificed his fiend god body to save a group of innate living beings. No one knew what Patriarch River Styx had set up here to suppress the Tao of destruction, so that the boundless calamities and tribulations could not destroy these ants. On top of that, these ants had persevered in this place for so many years, persevering in their desire to live. And these people were the direct descendants of the fiend god of destruction, Ro, who cultivated in the Tao of destruction. That was why they had branded the marks of the Tao of destruction on their skin, from the outside to the inside, and from the inside to the outside at the same time. If Yuan Yu's guess was correct, these mummies were only left with their skin. Beneath the human skin was the concentrated essence of destruction. These fiend disciples of destruction used their own Tao to polish the skin from the inside, and at the same time, they used the destructive power of the Tao of destruction from the outside to the inside, gathering all their essences on the human skin. After all, a small part of it was the blood and sweat of these innate living beings, and most of it was an extraordinary treasure made from the Tao. Even Dara would be tempted by the essence of the Tao of destruction that was imprinted on it. If it was made into a Taoist robe, it would be the first acquired treasure in the world that could partially restrain the Tao of destruction. If it was made into a flag, it could activate the power of the ruins of End with a wave, destroying everything. It could even be used as a material to carry the legendary ruins of End array diagram. If it was made into a Taoist book, if Ro did not come out, it would be the most complete Tao of destruction in the world. Unfortunately, Yuan Yu also knew that this item was not something that could be easily obtained. Ro was trapped in the ruins of End. River Styx definitely knew of this item's existence, but he still allowed it to come out. There was definitely a scheme behind this, and Yuan Yu was afraid of being schemed against. He did not dare to touch it. He did not dare to touch it. Unfortunately, Yuan Yu had forgotten. This world was not a place where you could safely pass through things just because you did not want to do something. Some people did not care whether you wanted to or not. Although they were still drooling over the mummy's human skin, Yuan Yu and Fan Wu Jia still rolled up their sleeves and prepared to listen to the ancient mummy suggestion. They wanted to fish up a few old worms, so that after being trapped for 100 years, all external objects would be worn away, and they could only run around naked, using their human skin to bear the wear of the Tao of destruction. Once they were polished into a treasure, they would still have to worry about others peeking at them. They found a spot and carefully observed the people fishing the worms, learning from their experience. One of the fishermen had already cast his shadow by the side of the blood river. He had been waiting attentively for a long time. The blood river flowed quietly. The blood water was still so corrosive, as if no living beings could survive in it, even though he knew that the filthy blood water was filled with countless worms that could not be seen. But no matter how Fan Wujie observed, he could not see the tiny worms in the blood water. The filthiest blood water contained everything. On the surface, the blood river true water was filthy, but in fact, the water virtue it represented was tolerance. Because it contained everything, it was filthy and incomparably filthy. However, this filth contained endless vitality. The blood river true water had a unique vitality, symbolizing the principle that all living beings were born in the water at the beginning. The tolerance of water became the foundation for the birth of life. Therefore, when the tiny worms hid in the filthy blood water, Ordinary Tao lords could not use their naked eyes and divine sense to distinguish them from the filthy life force of the blood river true water. Only the demonic creatures in the blood river could rely on their life force to filter out the worms from the blood water. The fisherman could only wait for the moment when the worms attacked. His body would instantly expand from a tiny size to a size that could be seen with the naked eye. Only then could he take the opportunity to kill the worms. The distance from the worms to attack was only 2 to 3 steps, so the fisherman's shadow was also only 2 to 3 steps away from the river. Fan Wu Jie saw with his own eyes that a horseshoe beetle the size of a turtle suddenly appeared in the blood river. It shot out a thin stream of poisonous sand. The person who had been focused on fishing the horseshoe beetle suddenly burst into action, releasing a precious pearl to illuminate his surroundings, causing his own shadow to disappear. But the speed at which the worms expanded and shot the sand was unimaginably fast. The moment his shadow disappeared, the faint poisonous sand still stuck to his shadow. The venomous fisherman shot out a thin needle from the divine crossbow in his hand, killing the venomous worm that couldn't dodge in time because it spat out the poisonous sand. Its life force was instantly depleted. Then, the fisherman quickly took off his leather coat and found a faint trace of corrosion on it. Then, he cut off the corresponding skin and quickly put on the leather coat. The whole process happened so fast that it only took 1 second for him to be in a trance. Yuan Yu said lightly, "The speed at which the worms shoot the sand is unimaginably fast." So the fisherman could only choose to endure the poison of the sand and then use the immunity of the leather coat to temporarily delay the spread of the poison. Then, he quickly cut off the part that was contaminated with the poison. Do you know why they took off the leather coat and cut off the part that was poisoned? Fan Wu Jie sighed. Because they can't damage the leather coat. This experience is useless to us. Fan Wu Jie said calmly. The 10,000-year-old worms that are useful to us are many times more poisonous than these worms, so there's no way for them to spread. The whole process is to shoot the sand and kill those who come into contact with it. It is one of the few poisons that can kill a Dao monarch's body. Without the protection of a body, we won't be able to last long in this returning ruins. We will die without a doubt. Not to mention anything else, the fellow Taoist who brought us here will not let us go. This should also be a test. Fan Wu Jie said lightly, to see if we are qualified to join their plan. Yuan Yu carefully observed for 3 days and agreed. This is indeed a test, and we are also bait. The caterpillars use the reproductive impulse of the caterpillars, but the older the caterpillar, the harder it is to produce the reproductive impulse. Therefore, the caterpillars will not produce the reproductive impulse for creatures that they can't poison to death, nor will they produce the reproductive impulse for creatures that are too weak. Because the poisonous sand is very precious, and they only have 1 chance, so they must use it on the strongest living beings that they can kill. This is a kind of evolution for the sake of reproduction, as expected of that person's vague territory. So, the fisherman cannot use bait that is weaker than the worm skin he needs. To catch a 10,000-year-old worm, we need a Dao monarch, and to catch a 1,000-year-old worm, we need a heaven immortal as bait. Guess what if we are poisoned to death? We'll get the worm skin that is baited to be killed. Fan Wu Jie didn't answer, but right in front of his eyes, a caterpillar fisherman had lured a caterpillar to shoot a silhouette. The caterpillar had shot a little further than expected, and it had hit the silhouette's head, or rather, where the silhouette's glasses were that weren't wrapped in the caterpillar skin. The heaven immortal fell to the ground without making a sound. Someone came up and took off his robe, sending it to one of the 2 Dao lords, the dirty and skinny man who was mocked by the heaven immortal, who stood motionless on the Kuan's corpse and did not fish for the reefs. The worm that he fished up was also sent to the Dao monarch. Looks like they are organized. Fan Wu Jie observed that there was no special expression on the faces of all the fishermen, no well-hidden hatred, and no numbness. Everyone just couldn't focus, and they had to stay focused, not daring to let their minds wander. The relics of the fishermen have a reasonable disposal mechanism, most likely to be given to his heirs. Yuan Yu also agreed, so without an organization, we are qualified bait. Have you thought of a way? Yuan Yu asked. I have thought of a way to kill the worm, but I can't think of a way to avoid the poisonous sand of the 10,000-year-old worm. We have to overestimate the toxicity of the worm, and the cosmic true water may not be able to defend against the poisonous sand of the same nature. Yuan Yu suddenly said, "Coincidentally, I have a way to defend against the poisonous sand, but I need a very short time difference. Whether the cosmic true water can stop the worm's poisonous sand in a single thought, if it can, I have a way to deal with the poison." A single thought was a very uncertain time, referring to the time a cultivator could think of a thought, and it was determined by their cultivation. Yuan Yu's mention here was naturally referring to the time a Tao monarch could think of a thought. This time was very fast, but the 10,000-year-old worm relied on speed to make a living, and all its survival potential was used for attack speed. Whether a Tao monarch's thought could keep up with the speed of the worm's poisonous sand was really a problem. Fan Wujie and Yuan, you could only see confirmation from the mummy. It's about that fast. The speed of the worm's poisonous sand is about the same as a golden immortal's thought, but it might be a little slower. But just like how there are strong and weak golden immortals, the worm is the same, and because there are very few connate golden immortals in the sinkhole who are stronger than postnatal Tao monarchs, Tao monarchs are already the best prey. The mummy chuckled. That is to say, if there is a 100,000-year-old worm or a 1,000,000-year-old worm, it might also attack, right? The probability is very low, the mummy said honestly, and the probability of a worm of that level appearing is even lower than the worm's chance of leaping through the ranks to hunt. If I'm not wrong. Yuan Yu came back and analyzed. The method Tao monarchs use on the Bone Continent is essentially no different from heaven immortals and immortals. They use the weaker worm's skin to delay the effects of the poisonous sand, and then make their shadows disappear as quickly as possible. It's also because the creation time is too short and the medium through which the poisonous sand takes effect is cut off. I have a transformation technique that can turn me into a ghost of the netherworld. You know that ghosts don't have shadows, and I only need a thought to transform. Among Tao monarchs, there shouldn't be a faster way to make shadows disappear than me. Because my speed surpassed the speed of the time-light true water before my shadow disappeared, I had already lost my connection with it. The locusts couldn't do anything even if they shot my shadow, because the karma between me and the shadow had already disappeared. I was a ghost without a shadow at that time. I just secretly tried it. The poisonous sand can't kill a ghost without a shadow. Yuan Yu continued, and your cosmic light true water should be the best at delaying time. Even if the poisonous sand can restrain the cosmic light true water, it can also restrain the poisonous sand. There is no speed in the world that can exceed the speed of the cosmic light. This is the fundamental law of the primordial world. Therefore, you can use the cosmic light true water to freeze time. Although the poisonous sand also has the cosmic light attribute, and the cosmic light true water cannot completely freeze time and space, it can still interfere for a moment. Let's work together. I will use the transformation technique to avoid the poisonous sand, and you will use the cosmic light true water to freeze time and slow down the poisonous sand shadow. Even if it is only for a moment, I can avoid the poisonous sand. Fan Wujie thought for a moment and finally admitted that this was the best method. He was not Yuan Yu's flesh and blood. Since Yuan Yu was willing to take the risk, he could only agree. However, he still set out of solidarity. Old Taoist, I didn't know that you were so fearless and righteous. My transformation technique is the fastest to avoid the poisonous sand. Your cosmic light true water can delay the poisonous sand to achieve the slowest speed. The two of us working together is the most likely combination to successfully kill the poisonous sand in the Blood Sea Perilous Land. If we don't succeed, I simply can't imagine how the Tao monarchs here can catch the poisonous sand. Yuan Yu slowly stretched out a finger and said, and I want 70%. Fan Wujie thought for a moment and sighed. Old Taoist is still old Taoist. I thought you had changed. Change my ass. All right, 70% is 70%. Chapter 1252. Yuan Yu stood at the edge of the Blood River abyss, facing the filthy blood water. His shadow was a foot away from the riverbank when suddenly there was a splash in the blood water, and a dark tail slapped across the surface of the water. This was a strange monster in the blood river, and no one knew what kind of strange magic it had. Fortunately, these monsters would not jump out of the blood river, so there was no need to pay attention to it for the time being. It took a lot of patience to fish the venomous centipede. Fortunately, Yuan Yu had been the sect master of the maiden sect for tens of millions of years. Patience was what he did not lack. Unlike the focus of the other venomous centipede fishermen, Yuan Yu put his hands in his sleeves and squatted down on the riverbank. He squinted his eyes and looked listless, like an old farmer sunbathing by the river. He was just short of pulling out a pipe to smoke. Maintaining focus while fishing the venomous centipede was very exhausting, and it was impossible to maintain this state of absolute focus for a long time. Many fishermen felt that they could not maintain such full concentration, so they returned to the middle of the Kuan corpse to rest for a while. Because of the taboo of fishing the venomous centipede, they did not make a sound and waited quietly on the riverbank. Looking at Yuan Yu's performance, they all had a strange expression on their faces. They exchanged a few glances, and the fishermen were not optimistic about the future of this eccentric old Taoist. Everyone waited on the side, casually paying attention to the situation on Yuan Yu's side, as if they were watching a show. They also knew that these two new faces should be newcomers from the outside, and they were most likely Tao Lords and Golden Immortals. But in this blood river, how many Tao Lords and Golden Immortals had died? But in reality, there were countless. This place had its own rules, and it was not something that Tao Lords and Golden Immortals could violate. Fan Wujia stood on the riverbank. For a Tao Lord like him, it was naturally not difficult to stand straight without a shadow. In fact, the venomous centipede was not a particularly dangerous monster. It was not even ranked among the monsters in the blood river, because its predatory characteristics were too obvious. As long as one protected their own shadow, or simply eliminated their own shadow, it was not difficult to avoid this danger. The real danger was the greed of luring the venomous centipede to attack. If one did not hunt this strange insect, there was no need to take this risk. It could be said that everyone who died here was not innocent. Can the horseshoe beetle sense the state of its prey? Fan Wujia looked at old Taoist Yuan Yu's relaxed look and knew that he did not need him to keep quiet. He even purposely relaxed his mind to lure the horseshoe insects to take the bait. There's a marvelous balance between the anglers, and they treat each other as prey. The hunter and the hunted are two opposing sides, and the loser will be rewarded by the other side. All the cultivators who fish for the anglers here understand this, which is why we respect this law, the Tao Lord standing guard on the shore said in a leisurely manner. Almost every good angler is doomed to die at the hands of the worms. But we don't hate these lowly insects. We even like them a little because we understand these insects, observe them, hunt them, peel off their skin, and protect us in this terrible place. We all know that these insects are small, weak animals, and they are incomparably lowly in this world. Just like us. It's because we understand these little insects, because we fight with them every day, that we understand them. They are weak and lowly, but because they obey the law, they become strong. Countless fierce beasts that are thousands of times stronger than them have become skeletons here. But these little insects have stubbornly survived, and that is because of their survival intelligence. First, focus. Every battle between a horseshoe beetle and an angler is a battle of focus. It can sense when you are distracted, sense even the slightest distraction, and then attack. Only those who are more focused, then it can kill it. Without focus, the horseshoe beetle cannot sense the moment the angler's mind is distracted. It kills us, and that is the reward it deserves. Second, patience. Don't think that the horseshoe beetle doesn't need patience. A horseshoe beetle, with its short lifespan, can lurk and attack us. Many horseshoe beetles never find a chance to attack in their entire lives, so they would rather die than attack. A lowly life form pays the price of its entire life to wait. What kind of patience is this? Third, sacrifice. A horseshoe beetle's entire life is waiting for a reason to reproduce. They use their focus, patience, stalemate, an accumulation in exchange for a chance to burn themselves, to kill a creature that is thousands of times stronger than themselves, to let their offspring reproduce on the enemy's corpse. And then they die. If a horseshoe beetle is lucky enough, it can only shoot twice in its life. The first time is to shoot the enemy's shadow with its poisonous sand, and the second time is to shoot the countless eggs it carries, as fine as dust, onto the enemy's corpse, and then die quickly. The dead horseshoe beetle's corpse loses most of its life essence and immunity, but we will not kill it before it lays eggs, because it has a reason to enjoy its spoils. Every horseshoe fisherman sees the horseshoe beetle as a worthy opponent. We hunt it, and when we die, our corpses will become a new breeding ground for its offspring. This is the cycle of life. So, every horseshoe fisherman is alone. This is a one-on-one fight between man and horseshoe. Fan Wujie pretended not to hear the old Daylord's tactful advice. What a joke if someone used the culture of this place to persuade him to abandon his companions and risk his life to maintain the so-called tradition. Then what kind of Daylord was he? Don't be fooled by the old Daylord's compassionate words. Most of these angler cultures were added later on. How could the anglers in the beginning have such senseless sentiments? Most of them did everything they could in order to survive. These things should have been summed up later on, and then added with all sorts of strange explanations. If the cultivators in Impasse could come up with a method to hunt the anglers in batches without taking any risks, the mutated worms here would have been wiped out a long time ago. The old Daylord saw that Fan Wujie was not interested in this, and muttered, as expected of a newcomer brought by the fugitive faction. Only after despair will he reflect that escape is impossible, and survival is the only choice. Fan Wujie was stunned for a moment, and then came to his senses. The old Daylord's words had inadvertently revealed a message. In this blood-sea danger zone, not everyone had hope of escaping. It seemed that there were two groups of people here who wanted to escape from this place, and those who wanted to survive. Some people certainly wanted to escape, but there were others who simply accepted their fate and chose to stay here to struggle for survival. At present, it seemed that the two groups only had a conflict of ideas, and the actual relationship was not very bad. After all, there was no conflict of interest between the two sides, and the fugitive faction also needed to survive, while the survival faction did not completely give up hope of escaping. At this time, in the bloodwater in front of old Daylord Yuan Yu, a tiny speck of dust suddenly expanded to the size of a soccer ball. It was covered with a purplish-black skin, and was dark like an old turtle, but in actual form, it was indeed a three-legged beetle-like insect. This horseshoe beetle's size and color matched the standard of the 10,000-year-old horseshoe beetle that the mummy had described. From the size of a speck of dust, it expanded to the size of a soccer ball, giving Fan Wujie the time to react. And when it launched its attack, it shot out a faint colorless fine sand, and it was even more so in the time of half a thought. Only then did Fan Wujie realize that old Daylord Yuan Yu had already turned into a wisp of remnant soul, just like the last time when he had escaped from the pursuit, a faint black shadow. Although it floated in the air, it was formless and did not have a so-called shadow. At this time, it could be said that old Daylord Yuan Yu already had victory in his hands. The 10,000-year-old horseshoe beetle only needed the time and the thought for the Daylord to expand into its attack form, and that little time was enough for Yuan Yu to change his form and his shadow to disappear conceptually. Fan Wujie still made his move, using the true water of time to disturb the time of the horseshoe beetle's sand-shooting shadow. Under the influence of his innate seed of time, the space of 1 foot from the horseshoe beetle to the old Daylord shadow was extended by 10 light years, or rather, a time barrier of 10 years. The faint colorless poisonous sand of the horseshoe beetle flowed across this distance. The poisonous sand, which carried the properties of the poison of time, was just like the light of time and could not be blocked by any power, not even the light barrier of time. But at the same time, the true water of time would also affect the poison of time. Even if it could not delay the time of 10 years, it had still reduced the absolute speed of the light of time within this 1 foot space to 10 thoughts, and the speed of the poisonous sand of time was extremely close to this absolute speed. Unexpectedly, a tiny insect had evolved to the divine ability of sand shooting shadow, which was close to the speed of light. Of course, this was also related to the strange properties of the poisonous sand of time. The nature of this deadly poison, which was named poisonous sand, was actually closer to the divine light. In the universe, the divine light magic was the closest to the original form of the light of time, and the light of time itself was a kind of divine light. Legend had it that the divine light that was emitted from the eyes of the great god Torch Dragon of the Panga clan was the innate substance that was closest to the essence of the light of time. It was called the light of time. Next to it was the true water of time of the 9 great innate true water, which was also an existence that was extremely close to the essence of the great Tao of time. This strange poisonous sand was the 3rd innate substance that Fan Wu Jia knew that was close to the essence of the great Tao of time. It was obtained from a yellow springs sand at the bottom of the river of blood, which was extracted from the poison of time and the calamity of death. It was a kind of mutated product of the great Tao of time. Of course, the poisonous sand that was shot out by the venomous beetle was not completely innate substance, but something that was derived after the innate substance had been contaminated by the venomous beetle. It was only a little bit of the innate substance, and with just this little bit of innate power, it was able to penetrate Fan Wu Jie's protective divine ability, the barrier of time. The venom of the venomous beetle was evident. The venomous time sand was delayed for a full 10 thoughts, which was enough for Yuan Yu to transform 10 times. It could be said that he had a lot of spare time. A wisp of old Taoist Yuan Yu floated to Fan Wu Jie's side and watched as the venomous beetle spat out the venomous beetle to the original position of the shadow and then dissipated in vain. Just like the light of time, Fan Wu Jie wanted to use the true water of time to collect a wisp of the poison of time, but before it dissipated, he was only able to retain less than 1/10,000th of it. Yuan Yu's fingertip shot out a ray of divine Yin light, which passed through the head of the venomous beetle. He reached out and flicked out a wisp of invisible true energy, which pulled the venomous beetle's carcass out of the river of blood. Old Taoist Yuan Yu looked at the football-sized, 10,000-year-old horseshoe beetles and compared them to his own size. Only then did he helplessly realize that it would take close to 30 10,000-year-old horseshoe beetles to make a Taoist robe that could completely cover the 2 of them. But the awkward thing was that even if the 2 of them split up, they would be able to hunt the venomous beetle alone without any risk. Whether it was Yuan Yu's transformation divine ability or Fan Wu Jie's true water of time, they were enough to hunt the venomous beetle safely. It looks like we need to talk about splitting the profits, Fan Wu Jie said expressionlessly. Earlier, seeing that you were taking a risk, I gave you 70%, but now it looks like the risk isn't as big as I thought. You still dare to ask for 70%? Don't forget, this is only a venomous beetle. What if it's a 100,000-year venomous beetle or a 1,000,000-year venomous beetle? Old Taoist Yuan Yu said in a carefree manner. If you can do it, then go ahead. If you don't want to split, then you can do it alone. Every spit that comes out of my mouth is like a nail, Fan Wu Jie said firmly. Since we've already discussed it, I won't go back on my word. But there's one thing we haven't talked about. What is it? Yuan Yu asked solemnly. The greatest value of this venomous beetle is its skin, but I just discovered a treasure that is not inferior to the venomous beetle's skin, and it is even more important to me, and that is the poisonous sand that the venomous beetle breeds. Poisonous sand. Yuan Yu's expression was a little uncertain. He said in a low voice, "Are you planning to use the poisonous sand? Have you thought it through? This blood sea forbidden ground has been through countless tribulations. Haven't you discovered that the poisonous sand is a treasure? It is something that anyone can think of, but the risk, it's very big." Fan Wu Jie wrapped the wisp of poisonous sand in time-light true water, making it look like a crystal sand. He said, "The poisonous sand of the venomous beetle has the properties of the time-light. It is invisible and formless. and it can easily be melted by the time-light river that flows in the universe. After the venomous beetle shoots out the poisonous sand, it will disappear in an instant. Even if I use time-light true water to hold it back, I can only save 1,000th of it. After all, my time-light true water cannot compare to the time-light river that runs through the universe. So, before the venomous beetle shoots out the poisonous sand, I can use time-light true water to freeze it and then dissect it to get the sand. Kill it before the venomous beetle shoots out the sand? Yuan Yu shook his head and said, "Impossible. You need a thought to use time-light true water, and after that thought, the venomous beetle shoots out the poisonous sand. It only needs a thought to complete its expansion and shoot the sand. To be more precise," Fan Wu Jie added, "it's a thought, an indistinct and indefinite, and a vector of time." The venomous beetle's preparation for shooting the sand was synchronized with its body's expansion, so it could shoot the poisonous sand after a thought. But in reality, after a thought, the venomous beetle would be in a state where it had not shot the sand. It was like a laser generator that had completed all the preparations to shoot the laser, but still needed to give a laser a vector of time. This movement could not be calculated with logic because there was no actual movement, but it was the key that could be used. As long as the venomous beetle finished expanding and was ready to shoot the sand, he could use time-light true water to kill it and obtain a complete carcass of the venomous beetle that had not shot the sand. Old Taoist Yuan Yu came back to his senses and said, "But thinking about it, it is not impossible. So you want to obtain the poisonous sand, and you want to increase your share of the profits so that I will give in? Don't forget, the poisonous sand is very important to you, a great killing weapon that is not inferior to time-light true water, but it is not that important to me. You want me to take such a huge risk for you, and you still want to be stingy? Just the fact that you suffered a loss before is not enough to convince me." Fan Wu Jie said, "Previously, when we split the profits, you took a bigger risk, but this time I will have to put in more effort. Without the time-light true water, it is impossible to obtain the poisonous sand. So I will take 60%, and you take 40%. Old Taoist Yuan Yu laughed sinisterly and said, "Little Fan, let me teach you a lesson. What determines the value of an object is not only the labor that condenses within it, but also the scarcity of the object. Yes, you condense more labor in the poisonous sand, but so what? It is incomparably rare and important to you. But to me, it is not as important as the venomous beetle's skin. In other words, the power to determine the value of an object is in my hands. Why should I put in so much effort to obtain something that is not necessary to me? And I already know what you're thinking. Yes, we have a chance to obtain the venomous beetle, but that must be with the help of both of us. At this time, I am in a position where labor is scarce, which means that my labor is scarce to you, and therefore of greater value. The most frightening thing is that this old Taoist, not only have a scarce value, but I also have a monopoly position. Other than me, you have no way of obtaining the venomous beetle sand. 73, I want 70%. Old Taoist Yuan Yu made an exorbitant demand and explained, "I have already considered the value of your labor before coming to this conclusion. I will not bargain, and at worst, we will split up and each fish for the venomous beetle." Fan Wu Jie thought for a moment and saw that Yuan Yu was very determined. Although it was very painful to be ripped off, the venomous time sand was indeed very important to him, and he had to agree no matter how much it hurt him. However, Fan Wu Jie made a request. "The venomous beetle is not as valuable to you as it is to me, so I want all of it." "Fine." Old Taoist Yuan Yu rubbed his hands together and laughed sinisterly. "But do you want to pay the price?" He. In a daze, Fan Wu Jie seemed to see himself tied to the slaughterhouse, and a hideous butcher with a wretched smile and a hateful face was sharpening his knife, the gleaming knife incomparably sharp. After negotiating the price, Fan Wu Jie was still in a daze. He touched his sleeves and said in a daze, "What a great loss! What a great loss! I have lost all my capital. I'm afraid I will have to work for 5 million years before I can repay the debt." The two of them had been busy by the blood river for a full 20 years, and the Dharma robes they were wearing were beginning to be worn away by the destructive tribulation power. Fan Wujia was wearing a Taoist robe made of venomous beetle skin that could barely cover his body, and it was patched up one after another. Old Taoist Yuan Yu, on the other hand, was wearing a loose Taoist robe that was completely made of venomous beetle skin. It was clean and beautiful, and it looked very luxurious. In any case, when the fishermen who were resting at the side saw it, they all looked like they were dazzled by the wealth. Fan Wujia, on the other hand, looked like a beggar, wearing a short venomous beetle skin shirt that could barely cover his body, and a tattered Dharma robe that was leaking everywhere. He looked like a young and promising beggar in his prime. His eyes were filled with tears as he looked at the dozens of grains of sand that were as clear as crystals in his right hand. This was the poisonous sand of time that had been refined with cosmic true water, and when combined together, it could form a connate mother sand, the sand of time. If the mother sand was separated and turned into countless tiny grains of poisonous sand that could not be seen, mixed into the cosmic true water, the sand would borrow the power of the water, and the power of the sand would increase by 1/10 of the destructive power of the cosmic decline tribulation. Fan Wujia named this divine ability the flourishing mortal dust sand, taking the beauty of youth, not leaving it for the youth. 3,000 red dust stains the hair. The red dust stains the youth, not leaving it for the youth. Sissy, so genteel. Yuan Yu commented disdainfully. Chapter 12:53. Have we passed the test? Fan Wujia asked as he walked in front of the mummy. The mummy smiled and said, "Don't blame us, fellow Taoist. We had no other choice. If we want to escape from this eye of the sea, we won't be able to get away with just a leather suit. If we can't even get a 10,000-year-old leather suit, then there's no point in joining us. In other words, this is the first test." The first test, Yuan Yu said unhappily. Is there a second test? The mummy smiled but didn't answer. It continued. Since you two have passed the first test, then I will bring you to our meeting place. The few of them climbed down from the Kohen's corpse and continued to walk along the winding blood river. The mummy's green fur fluttered in the wind as it walked along the blood river. Behind it was a beggar in rags and a Taoist in a fluttering Taoist robe. It was a strange combination as they walked along the blood river. Fan Wujia and Yuan Yu were a little hesitant. Where is this bastard taking us? Fan Wujia asked in a low voice. Is he trying to take advantage of us? I think this bastard is very strange. The way out of the Blood Sea is only in the hands of the great Azura King Poya's old subordinates. Before King Poya was suppressed, he raised his hand to prop up this pure land. No one knows this place better than his old subordinates. Yuan Yu said as if he was trying to cheer himself up. Little Fan, we've been forced into this place, and there's no turning back. Now we have no choice but to walk this path to the end. The two of them secretly raised their spirits and looked around cautiously. As they walked further away from the mummy, they started to walk into King Poya's palm. The 5 heavenly pillars stood in all directions, surrounding the depression formed by the palm. Rumble, the deafening roar of the blood river, came from in front of them. They were all taken aback as they saw a boundless sea of blood in front of them. It was white and gloomy, and at the end of the land and mountains was a boundless sea of blood. The thick color of blood made people's hearts tremble with fear. Yuan Yu spread his palms and used his palm lines to simulate the scene when he fell from the eye of the ocean and saw the land on Poya King's palm. So that's how it is. The center of the palm was slightly caved in, and there were countless tiny veins on the towering hills around it that gathered at the center of the palm. The origin, corroding blood that flowed down from the 5 fingers and the mound of the palm all gathered there, forming an inner sea surrounded by the continent of bones. After that, 2 rivers of blood flowed out from the inner sea. One flowed along the path that we came from and fell into the gate of the valley. The other flowed from the tiger's mouth and formed a huge waterfall that fell into the blood sea below the bone continent. The boundless sea of blood emitted a soul-stirring vitality, as if it was a gigantic life. It contained both the origin and the final destination, making all living beings feel small and shaken in front of it. Its huge body swayed slightly, and the rippling life energy and blood energy made it hard for people to stand steadily. His primordial spirit felt a great sense of dizziness, and this was just a tiny body. In the face of such a vast and incomparable life, it instinctively lost its head. The blood sea, Yuan Yu clicked his tongue and said, "This is the blood sea that gave birth to a lawless and terrifying existence like the slaughter demon ancestor. Legend has it that the blood sea was formed from the filthy blood that flowed out from the body of the great god Pangu, who created the world. It contains endless life energy, including all the secrets of the origin and end of all living beings. Only such a terrifying existence could give birth to an almighty being like the demon ancestor. The blood sea gave birth to the slaughtered demon ancestor. Could it be that the blood sea gave birth to a terrifying existence as well?" Fan Wu Jie said in shock. "The blood sea that nurtured the Nether River Patriarch is countless times vaster than this. What you see is merely a scale of the blood sea before you, and the blood sea before you is merely a bit of blood accumulated in the palm of the king's hand that holds it out. The entire blood sea that drowns the king, including the blood mist sea in the ultimate, is merely the blood left behind when the Nether River Patriarch stirred the true, boundless blood sea." The mummy said quietly, "Do you think that you can imagine the blood sea just by looking at this lake of blood? Huh? You can't even imagine the terror of the blood sea." After the mummy finished speaking, it stood silently on the spot, lost in thought. Fan Wu Jie could actually see a trace of deep, bone-deep fear on the mummy's face, which had no expression at all from the mummy's emaciated face. "The ancestor river Styx," the mummy said faintly. He dared to scold the traitor Shemali, the lord of Dara, but he did not dare to harbor any resentment towards the true mastermind, the slaughtered demon ancestor. Fan Wu Jie did not know what King Poya and his old subordinates had encountered in the past, but to be able to make the mummy a terrifying expert with a strong and tenacious heart, unable to erase that shadow in his entire life, it was easy to imagine the terror of the ancestor river Styx, who was revered as the slaughter demon ancestor. "The blood sea does not dry up. The river Styx does not die," Yuan Yu said with a sigh. The mummy trembled. "How dare you? How dare you say such a thing?" A horrified expression appeared on his skeletal face. This was the first time Fan Wu Jie had seen the mummy reveal such an expression. "The blood sea does not dry up. The river Styx does not die." Fan Wu Jie thought about it for a while and understood that the river Styx was the slaughtered demon ancestor's real name. If the blood sea does not dry up, the river Styx does not die. The reverse of this sentence would mean that the blood sea does not dry up, the river Styx dies. Fan Wu Jie's heart shook, and he thought to himself, this sentence hides the secret of how to kill the slaughter demon ancestor. No wonder the mummy was so terrified. If I were the slaughter demon ancestor, I would not let anyone know my weakness. But soon, Fan Wu Jie could not help but laugh. Even Yuan Yu knew this sentence, and 2 out of 3 people here knew it. It was not a secret. If the slaughter demon ancestor wanted to hide its weakness, it would have to kill 2/3 of the experts in untainted land, not to mention the big shots that the slaughter demon ancestor could not touch. For example, the 3 Daozu, the Gautama Buddha, and the other destruction demon ancestor. And even if they knew that the blood sea would dry up and the river Styx would die, could they kill the slaughter demon ancestor? The true boundless blood sea was probably countless times grander than what he had seen. It might even be stronger than the sinkhole. Even if everyone knew that the massacring demon lord could only be killed by severing the foundation of the blood sea and drying up the entire blood sea, was there anyone who could do it? Fan Wu Jie thought carefully, and suddenly realized the true secret of this sentence. On the surface, this sentence is hinting at the way to kill the slaughter demon ancestor. But this method is actually impossible, so it is actually promoting the power of the slaughter demon ancestor in disguise. but also seems to be hinting at another layer of secret. The origin of the slaughter demon ancestor. If the blood sea does not dry up and the river Styx does not die, then the blood sea is the river Styx, and the river Styx is the blood sea. This implies that the true body of the river Styx ancestor is actually the blood sea. Wait, this blood sea is also a part of the blood sea. Then isn't it equivalent to a clone of the slaughter demon ancestor? Fan Wu-jie came back to his senses. The Shemali king, the Ashura clan's guards, and the guards guarding the ultimate seal were all just a show. After King Poya rebelled and tried to rescue the destruction demon ancestor Ro, the reason why the river Styx ancestor spent so much effort to set up this blood sea to suppress the destruction demon disciples, and even bribe King Poya's subordinates to betray and guard these old subordinates was all a smokescreen. The real guardian of the destruction demon ancestor Ro was probably this primordial corroding blood sea. It was the clone of the slaughtered demon ancestor. No wonder. How could the slaughtered demon ancestor trust a traitor? He had personally suppressed the destruction demon ancestor here, so of course he had to personally guard it to be at ease. Thinking deeper, the reason why the slaughter demon ancestor had suddenly suppressed the destruction demon ancestor, who was also a demon path sect master, was probably because he had long foreseen the destruction of the primordial world and the day when the destruction demon ancestor would become even stronger. His foundation was the boundless blood sea, and its power was incomparably vast. It was impossible for anyone to suppress him. Its only weakness was that it could destroy everything. It was the enemy of all existences. The only thing in the world that could dry up the blood sea was the destruction demon ancestor's demonized ultimate. If the ultimate's power was twice as strong as it was now, it could probably encircle the blood sea, suppress it, and slowly erase it. So the slaughter demon ancestor had made the first move to gain the upper hand. Fan Wu-jie was shocked by his own imagination. He seemed to have touched on the truth behind the destruction of the primordial world and the suppression of the destruction demon ancestor. It was a secret that was truly enough to shock the universe. The true body of the slaughter demon ancestor was the boundless ancient blood sea, and its only nemesis was the destruction demon ancestor's demonized ultimate ruin CI. If either of these two pieces of news were leaked, it would be enough to change the entire situation of the myriad tribulations demon path. At this time, Fan Wu-jie was not sure of his previous speculation. It was impossible for such a terrifying secret to be known by too many people. As long as the blood sea doesn't dry up, the river Styx doesn't die. This sentence might really be a taboo. Yuan glanced at the corpse that was reacting violently and shook his head slightly. The demon ancestor doesn't care. The demon ancestor doesn't care, but the demon children under him do. The corpse stared at old Taoist Yuan and squeezed out a sentence from between its teeth. This is a taboo. You better not touch it again, or I can only use mutual destruction to erase you. The demon ancestor doesn't care about ants like us. If we want to escape, we can only pray that he doesn't care about us. Therefore, it's best for us to know less. The less we know, the safer we will be. If someone wants to know too many secrets and cause us to be unable to escape from here, I will be the first to not let him go. The fifth of the primordial world's 10 deadly propositions. You know too much. Since ancient times, countless heroes and powerhouses had died unknowingly because they were too deeply involved in the schemes of the great powers and knew too much. This sentence had even given rise to the fourth of the 10 greatest death questions. Fellow Taoist, please stay. There are probably some inconceivable things under the blood sea. Yuan said in a low voice. It's best not to touch it easily. The corpse looked deeply at Yuan and said in a low voice, You have many secrets, but people with too many secrets don't live long. Remember, I don't care what strange things you have on you. Before we escape, you better know your place. The corpse stood at the edge of the blood sea for a long time. It was unknown what method it used to send a signal to the other side. After a long time, Fan Wu-jie and Yuan saw a small black appear far away from the blood sea. When the black dot grew bigger and bigger, they could clearly see that it was a small boat with black awning. A boatman stood at the bow of the boat, rowing 2 oars. The small boat swayed as it approached. It didn't look very eye-catching. Even the boatman on the boat was wearing a straw raincoat. He looked like an ordinary fisherman. However, this inconspicuous little boat traversed the blood sea peacefully. This made Fan Wujie and Yuan Yu's hair stand on end. Old Taoist Yuan Yu said in a low voice, "Legend has it that there's a ferryman on the river Styx of the Nine Nether that guides souls to the underworld of reincarnation. The boundless blood sea's mysteriousness is not much less than the river Styx. Could this be the legendary ferryman of the river Styx?" The ferryman of the river Styx. Fan Wujie's hair stood on end. Since ancient times, the underworld had been incomparably mysterious. Before the collapse of the primordial era, there were legends of immortals and gods breaking into the underworld and returning safely. After the collapse of the primordial era, no one knew where the underworld ended. If it weren't for the fact that souls could reincarnate normally, the universe would have thought that the underworld had been destroyed during the great calamity of the primordial era. Since then, the underworld had become a legend. There were many fragments of the netherworld and the dark side of the world. Tao lords and golden immortals could ascend to the heavens and descend to the yellow springs, but the location of reincarnation was nowhere to be seen. Other than the fragments, it was as if the underworld had disappeared. But no one had ever seen the complete soul of a Tao lord after his death. The remnant soul of a Tao lord that the world had seen was some kind of indescribable existence. It was closer to a kind of obsession. Legend had it that the Tao lord's true spirit had been captured by the underworld. And no matter how powerful a Tao lord was, no one had ever returned from reincarnation. Even if someone had awakened the mystery in the womb and realized their past life, they would not be able to recall the situation of reincarnation. At this time, the existence of the underworld had become a taboo. When the ferryman stopped the boat by the shore, Fan Wujie finally could not help but ask, "Where is the underworld?" The ferryman's hand that was tying the boat stopped. He raised his head and frowned with his wrinkled face. "The underworld has long been destroyed. The heaven court has been destroyed, so how could the underworld still exist? The 10 alls of Yinluo are all dead. Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva does not dare to enter hell again. The blood sea, river Styx, and the netherworld Edu are not in the present world. So, young man, you are asking where the underworld is? Are you seeking death?" Fan Wujie was stunned, and he said, "How is asking for death? Where's the netherworld? Isn't that just seeking death?" The boatman stopped the boat and said to the shore, "Are you guys still going?" The mummy straightened his body and jumped straight onto the boat. The boatman looked at him and said, "Your condition is getting worse and worse. If you don't beg me to send you to the river Styx, you will be completely destroyed by the Tao of destruction. Your soul will be destroyed, and your true spirit will not exist anymore. You will not even have a next life. I know my own affairs," the mummy said gloomily. "The underworld is gone. How do the living beings in the universe reincarnate? Where do the souls go after death? Why do the universe only find some lost souls? What is in the depths of the netherworld's fragment?" Fan Wujie still could not suppress his curiosity. Listening to the boatman's words, he really was related to the underworld, so he could not help but ask, "Why are you asking so many questions? Are you coming on a boat?" The boatman said. Yuan Yu jumped onto the boat, and Fan Wujie followed. The boatman untied the rope, and the 2 oars swung a foot away with a slight force. The boat slowly sailed towards the blood sea. The boatman said, "The underworld is gone, but the reincarnation is still there. The depths of the netherworld is the reincarnation. The heaven court is gone, the underworld is gone. Why is the reincarnation still there? The reincarnation is an existence older than the heaven court and the underworld. The reason why the underworld was destroyed was probably because it interfered with the reincarnation, which caused the dissatisfaction of the ancient existence. Even the 10 halls Yinluo, Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva, and Qinghua Empress could not ignore the dissatisfaction. So the 10 halls Yinluo died. Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva changed to sit beside the blood sea. Why did Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva sit beside the blood sea? The hell of the universe had sunk into the blood sea, and the sinful souls and evil ghosts had all run into the blood sea. So what could he do if he did not go? The boatman said calmly, "Now the blood sea is the hell of Avicii. You are asking so many questions. Sooner or later, you will be fated with hell." Fan Wu-jie did not dare to ask any more questions, because he felt that as he asked and answered, he really had a trace of fate with a deep and terrifying place, and there was a great terror in it, so he could not seek death anymore. The small boat glided on the blood sea and went straight into the depths of the blood sea. Not long after, it disappeared into the boundless background of blood, and neither did it connect to the sky nor the ground, and no one knew where it was going. Chapter 1254. The small boat had traveled for an unknown number of miles, but the blood sea was still as boundless as before. Amidst the waves of the blood sea, this small boat was shuttling back and forth lightly like a swallow. No one knew when, but the waves on the blood sea had become even higher, and each wave was even higher than the one above Fan Wu-jie's head, crashing towards the small boat. At this moment, in the distant horizon, against the boundless blood-red background, a tiny black dot appeared before everyone's eyes. As the black dot gradually approached them, Fan Wu-jie could clearly see that this black dot was not some island or ship, but an incomparably huge pincer. This pincer was several times larger than the giant kuan they had seen before, and the huge shell on its back rode the wind and waves like an island in a sea of blood. As the giant pincer drew closer, Fan Wu-jie could see that it was not just a small island. It was practically a miniature continent. The waves the giant pincer had stirred up were already several dozen feet high, and the small boat was like a boat sailing through the mountains. The shell of the giant pincer looked like it had been cut by an axe, and it was clear that it had been weathered by the passage of time. It was impossible to tell how many years this divine pincer had lived in the blood sea. Judging from the marks on the shell that carried the aura of destruction, the Tao of destruction that had been inflicted 100 million years ago was left behind. And before that, the divine pincer's body still bore the huge wounds of destruction that did not contain the aura of destruction. The hideous wounds that had healed reminded everyone of the terrible attacks that this divine pincer had survived. The oldest wound on the divine pincer's body dates back to 100 million years ago, and this divine pincer should have lived for a very long time by then. Fan Wu-jie's expression was grim. In other words, this divine pincer is not the descendant of a sentient life form that fell into the blood sea. It is a sentient life form that fell into the blood sea and has yet to die. Do you see the scars on its body? Fan Wu-jie said, "The time when those scars were formed is very close to the time when the primordial era was broken. This could be a god that lived through the primordial era. After the primordial era was broken, it could still survive after falling into the ultimate ruins." Taoist Yuan Yu exclaimed in horror. "This divine beast must be incredibly powerful. Quickly turn around. We can't become enemies with this divine beast." The mummy stood at the bow of the boat and watched as the divine turtle turned around slightly and swam towards the boat. The waves it raised formed a wall of water that was as tall as the sky. The blood-red wall of water came crashing down from the direction of the giant turtle, as if it was going to smash the tiny boat into pieces. "We're here," the mummy said calmly. "This divine turtle will be your gathering place." Hearing this, Fan Wu-jie and Yuan Yu also came back to their senses, and they became even more fearful of the organization behind the mummy. This divine turtle was probably one of the most terrifying monsters in the Blood Sea impasse. However, even such a peerless monster had to build a base for them. Just based on this divine turtle that was supporting their holy land, the organization behind the mummy could be said to be one of the most troublesome organizations in the entire Blood Sea impasse. "What a grand display!" Yuan Yu gasped and said, "This is a show of strength to us. I still think that the boatman, who might be the ferryman of the river Styx, is even grander." Fan Wu-jie whispered, "That boatman knows a lot of terrifying secrets. If he were to reveal them, he would probably turn the entire world upside down." compared to the great secrets of the underworld. The divine turtle that survived the primordial era is nothing. Sit tight. The boatman shouted, and with a push of the wooden oar, the whole boat moved horizontally in the raging waves, and like an arrow, it shot towards the shell of the divine turtle. On the shell of the divine turtle, there were dozens of dark and heavy divine mountains, each of them exuding an awe-inspiring aura. Each of them was an extraordinary piece of divine soil. The divine turtle carried the divine mountains on its back, and Taoist Yuan Yu found them very familiar. The black divine mountains were majestic, and they were surrounded by mist. They were very mysterious, and in the depths of the mist, immortal light shone, and even Taoist Yuan Yu felt a trace of pressure. The vast immortal light, every strand of it had an extremely vast aura. From tens of millions of miles away, it was so oppressive that one could not move. This is an unknown divine soil, and it might be a fragment of the divine soil formed when the primordial era was broken. I have seen this kind of inextinguishable immortal light in a terrifying world that was said to be formed by the fragment of Mount Buzhou. That world was said to be the Taoist field of celestial Lord Guanqing. Yuan Yu felt a toothache. The emergence of this divine mountain made him feel a trace of danger. The divine soil carried by the divine turtle, and the divine mountain that sank into the ruins of End. Fan Wu Jie said numbly, "Could it be two of the 5 divine mountains carried by the divine turtle that fell into the ruins of End?" Years ago, the Heaven Emperor ordered the divine turtle to carry the 5 celestial mountains of Daiyu: Yuanjiao, Fanghu, Yingzhou, and Penglai. These divine mountains were 30,000 miles in diameter, and the distance between each mountain was 70,000 miles. They were the residences of the overseas immortals. However, the giants of Dragon Count Country hooked up the divine turtle that carried the 2 divine mountains of Daiyu and Yuanjiao. It caused the 2 divine mountains to sink into the ruins of End. This happened before the primordial era was broken. Could this divine turtle be the divine turtle that carried the divine mountains back then? Could the divine mountains on its back be the legendary Daiyu and Yuanjiao continents? Fan Wujie said with a trembling voice. If it really was the divine mountains of Daiyu and Yuanjiao, it would be an incredible divine soil that could protect anyone from the destructive tribulation power in the ruins of End. Fan Wujie gave the mummy a strange look, as if saying, "You have 2 great divine mountains, but you still ended up in such a miserable state. Don't tell me you are trying to trick us." The mummy smiled bitterly and said, "This divine turtle is not the divine turtle that carried the 5 divine mountains back then, but its descendant. What it carries on its back is not the divine mountains of Daiyu and Yuanjiao, but the fragment of Daiyu. This divine turtle is not as strong as its ancestor, so it can only carry the remains of the divine soil and divine mountains. Moreover, the depths of the divine mountains are very dangerous, even more dangerous than the destructive tribulation power. No one has ever walked out of it alive." The mummy said bitterly, "We dare not get too close to the divine mountains, afraid that the ominous things buried in the divine mountains will stain the divine soil with blood and awaken some terrible beings. The fragment of Daiyu was grabbed from the bottom of the sea by my king before he was drowned in the sea of blood. There is a great secret hidden in it. Legend has it that the divine mountains of Daiyu and Yuanjiao fell into the ruins of End because someone wanted to cover up some of the traces left on them. We cannot afford to offend an almighty being who can plot to sink 2 divine mountains. The secret he wants to cover up is not something we can investigate. Since ancient times, the ruins of End has been like a trash can. Before the slaughtered demon ancestor buried the scariest piece of trash in here, it had already buried countless secrets. These secrets may be quiet here, but they can also kill people." Yuan Yu warned, "Just open one eye and close the other." The divine mountains shone with immortal light, but in the eyes of the people, it was no longer sacred immortal light. It was a deadly demonic light. The sinking of 2 divine soil immortal mountains had caused the death of countless ancient immortals. The secret that such an existence wanted to cover up was a real life-threatening talisman for the acquired heaven ants after the destruction of the primeval world and the dead remnants of the old tribes of Rahu and Azura. At this moment, Fan Wu Jie suddenly understood why the mummy and the others did not dare to go deep into the divine soil, even though they were trapped in the Blood Sea. It was just like the number 5 on the Chaos Top 10 Death-Seeking ranking. You know too much. In this world, there was no harm in knowing less about other things besides the great Tao. Fan Wu Jie was speechless. The boat steadily leaned against the shell of the divine turtle, and the boatmen began to chase them off the boat. Fan Wu Jie originally thought that the boatman was the organization's special guide to the divine mountains, but now it seemed that the boatman was just bringing outsiders into the divine mountains. Perhaps his real job was still to ferry people in the Nether Blood Sea. Here comes another one. A hunchbacked old man, naked under the sunlight, said angrily when he saw Fan Wu Jie and the others coming up the mountain. Another middle-aged Tao lord next to him stared nervously at the depths of the divine mountain and divine soil, calculating with his fingers. He only glanced at Fan Wu Jie and the others when he saw the mummy. He said disdainfully, "Dead remnants of the Azura clan." Then he saw Yuan Yu wearing a Taoist robe and sneered, "Another unlucky bastard. I'm afraid he won't live for more than 300 years. Wen Yishuan saw Fan Wu Jie. The things that Fan Wu Jie used to disguise himself as a giant assassin of the devil path had long since been eroded by the destructive storm. The iron rings that hung on his body were rusted to the point where only a little shape remained. The tattoos on his body were also blurred and indistinct. His head of colorful hair had become a dirty knot that had not been washed. His hair was tangled together in a dirty knot. In addition, he was wearing a tattered leather vest that did not cover his entire body. His overall style was very decadent. Messy and broken, dirty and elegant, formed a contradictory combination on his body. Fan Wu Jie's entire body was in tatters. His rustic, heavy metal robes, after being smeared with a thick layer of dirt, were surprisingly pleasing to the eye. Fan Wu Jie had just fallen into a dangerous situation, and his energy hadn't been depleted by the annihilation storm yet. He had become numb and spirited, and his unique attire made the middle-aged Tao Lord feel a little uneasy. The Tao Lords in the dangerous place mainly relied on their temperament to determine whether a person was new to the outside world. The more graceful and extraordinary the person, the later they came. On the contrary, those who were dirty, battered, and had a wretched appearance might have stayed in the dangerous place for a period of time. This was because the Tao Lords in the outside world were the rulers of the world, and had lived in the body for countless years to nourish their qi. Even the most unbearable of people would have a powerful aura deposited in their bones. But after coming here, no matter how extraordinary their bones were, no matter how arrogant they were, the destructive tribulation would wear them down. At that time, the Tao Lords and Golden Immortals could not help but have a heavy aura of lethargy. This was the first time the middle-aged Tao Lord had seen a contradictory combination of decadence and arrogance like Fan Wu Jie. Subconsciously, his fingers paused, and a subtle change occurred. The middle-aged Tao Lord could not care about anything else. The veins on his forehead bulged as he shouted, "Everyone, pay attention. The northwest wind is coming." As soon as he finished speaking, he faced the northwest and opened his mouth. The hunchbacked old man jumped to his feet and opened his mouth in the northwest direction. His neck was about a foot long, and he looked like a king. At this time, his collar wriggled, and only then did Fan Wu Jie and the others realize that it was not a hunchback at all. They were obviously 8 large sarcomas, and on the sarcomas grew distorted organs and faces. Their mouths were also the size of a palm, and the sarcomas' mouths were filled with messy teeth. In addition to the hunchback old man's main head, all 9 of his heads opened their mouths towards the northwest. It looked a little funny, but it was even more creepy. The 9-headed turtle. Yuan Yu whispered to Fan Wu Jie. As soon as the two turned around, they realized that the corpse had disappeared. Only then did they see that it had quickly climbed up a nearby hill. Suddenly, a dozen or so Tao lords and golden immortals appeared in the vicinity. They were either old or withered, but no one would suspect that they were a group of corpses. They were all incredibly excited, and one of them looked towards the northwestern divine mountain with eyes brimming with tears. It's been 3,000 years. The northwest wind has finally arrived. We won't starve to death. We won't starve to death. An old man who was trying his best to maintain the demeanor of an immortal, but unfortunately, the effect was not very good because of his messy hair and beard and his twitching eyes. He muttered, "Eating wind and drinking dew. An immortal's home." The crowd was inexplicably happy, and Fan Wujie and Yuan Yu were confused. However, it was never wrong to follow the crowd. Yuan Yu took the lead and climbed up a small hill nearby, attracting the angry glares of the strange people on the nearby hills. A strange wind came from the depths of the sacred mountain, blowing the celestial light in the depths of the celestial ground and causing it to shake. Countless melodious sounds that sounded like the tinkling of jade rings could be heard. What followed was a refreshing fragrance that made people feel relaxed and happy. Fan Wujie only took a sniff, and he felt his magic power being drained away. His expression changed drastically, and he shouted, "This is the fragrance of spirit medicine. Old Taoist, do you smell it? For to emit such a mysterious fragrance, there must be an immortal herb growing in the depths of the divine mountain. Such a strong medicinal fragrance, the spirit medicine inside, must have grown for countless generations. Only the incredible celestial ground of the Dayu fragment could have the fortune to support so many generations of spirit medicine. Old Taoist." Fan Wujie turned around excitedly, only to see old Taoist Yuan Yu gulping down all the essence of the medicinal fragrance that was drifting toward their hill along with the northwest wind. Old Taoist Yuan Yu kept his mouth shut, and it was difficult for him to digest the fortune. Fan Wujie turned back to look, and all the old monsters around him had their mouths wide open. There wasn't even the slightest bit of medicinal fragrance left for him. Fan Wujie was so angry that the three corpses got jumped. He looked at old Taoist Yuan Yu and said with an unfriendly expression, "Fellow Taoist, your face is red and you're sweating profusely. Are you feeling unwell? That medicinal fragrance must be poisonous." Fan Wujie used the time true water. Something blown out from this strange, celestial ground can't possibly be a spirit medicine or a rare treasure. "Fellow Taoist, don't panic. I'll help you vomit it out. I'll force that strange poisonous mist out." Old Taoist Yuan Yu was busy swallowing that mouthful of medicinal qi of good fortune. However, that mouthful of medicinal qi of good fortune was too big for him to digest in a short period of time. Seeing Fan Wujie's unfriendly expression, he hurriedly waved his hand to indicate that he was fine. But Fan Wujie's portion was swallowed by him, and he was forced to sign an unfair agreement to collect the sand of time. With all these new and old grudges mixed together, he hated old Taoist Yuan Yu so much that the roots of his teeth were itching. Fan Wujie's eyes flashed coldly, and he sprayed the time true water at old Taoist Yuan Yu's face. Old Taoist Yuan Yu was so anxious that he couldn't help but say, "Little Fan, stop." As soon as he opened his mouth, golden medicinal mist sprayed out. Fan Wujie looked at his own good fortune with a conflicted expression. Logically speaking, he should be rushing forward to snatch his spoils of war. But this was spat out from the mouth of an old Taoist, a wretched old Taoist whose face was wrinkled like the skin of a tangerine and who frequented the brothels every day. Rationally, Fan Wujie knew that a Taoist lord's Taoist body was tranquil and there shouldn't be any filth in it. But emotionally, he couldn't accept the possibility that he had swallowed the saliva of an old man. At this time, a sharp laughter reached Fan Wujie's ears, and he heard a slippery voice say, "You don't want it? If you don't want it, I want it." Then he saw a slender, greasy old man who was as thin as a loach jump up to his side. He couldn't wait to put his face close to old Taoist Yuan Yu and swallowed the golden mist at the corner of his mouth. This time, it was old Taoist Yuan Yu's turn to have an interesting expression. Fan Wu Jie looked at the nine-headed hunchbacked old man beside him and shook his head regretfully. What a pity that he beat me to it. It wasn't that these people couldn't wait, but in the eyes of the Blood Sea tribulation, there was nothing that could withstand the destructive tribulation power. None of them had anything on them, not even a jade bottle to store the medicinal mist, so they could only rely on their mouths. Fan Wu Jie had a conflicted expression on his face. He could use the time-light true water to reverse time and extract the golden medicinal mist from old Taoist Yuan Yu's mouth. But what could he use to store it? If he didn't have a way to store it, then wouldn't it just benefit others for nothing? So, Fan Wu Jie stretched out a hand and made a gesture to write it off. He used the condition of writing off the unequal treaty they had signed before as a condition to write off the matter. The strange gust of wind came from the northwest, carrying with it some things from the celestial ground. Fan Wu Jie and the group of old monsters used their mouths to catch them. One after another, spirit herbs that shone brightly and brimmed with immortal energy fell into their mouths, and their scrawny bodies began to fill up at a visible rate. Just as this feast of northwest wind was about to come to an end, an ordinary-looking jade bead floated to the outside of the celestial ground. Fan Wu Jie didn't notice anything, but Yuan Yu saw it, and his eyes almost popped out. Ignoring the undigested medicinal mist in his mouth, he shouted, "Fanboy, let's work together. That jade bead is the fruit of the tree of immortality. The real tree of immortality." Fan Wu Jie heard this and looked at the jade bead again. A rumor flashed through his mind, and he immediately used the time-light true water. The time-red dust sand in the true water turned into countless red dust barriers, creating countless space-time labyrinths in the direction the jade bead came from. The reversal of space-time and the sand of time that consumed one's lifespan trapped all the old monsters that were rushing toward the jade bead for a breath's time. At this time, Yuan Yu turned into a wisp of soul and floated behind the jade bead. He used a transformation spell and temporarily transformed into a jade bead. Although it was only a temporary transformation of magic power, it was enough to fool Dao lords who didn't look closely. Fan Wu Jie's cosmic light mortal dust maze had only trapped those old monsters for a brief moment. In the next moment, they joined forces and tore apart the universal barrier. They surrounded the jade bead and fought fiercely. Their powerful divine powers instantly tore apart the surrounding space. Only the fragment of the celestial continent on the back of the divine turtle remained unmoved and undamaged. Fan Wu Jie quickly turned into a streak of light and escaped, while old Taoist Yuan Yu had long since disappeared into the space-time maze. The Kunlu Mountains have pearls and jade trees. The Langxian tree actually looks like pearls, and its texture is like fine jade. In the west of the classic of mountains and seas, it is said that there is an evergreen tree, on which there are 3 men serving the tree. Before the primordial world was broken, it was recorded that there were only 3 deity lands that possessed the immortal divine medicine. One of them was the Kunlun immortal world, where the Queen Mother of the West had the immortal medicine. The second was Mount Wu. Where there was Mount Wu, there was the yellow bird in the west. The arch-medicine 8 vegetarian temples. The yellow bird belongs to the shaman, the mysterious snake. The third was the 3 islands of Penglai. However, the 3 islands of Penglai were the 3 divine mountains that survived Dragon Count's fishing. In other words, the 2 divine mountains of Daiyu and Yuanjiao that fell into the ruins of End could also produce the immortal medicine. Fan Wu Jie's thoughts flashed like lightning. There were several types of immortal medicine. Within the ruins of Kunlun alone, there were several types of immortal medicine. Some were like springs, some were like jade, some were like trees, and some were like grass and vines. Among them, the Langxian tree was one of the immortal medicine that was recorded in the books. Its fruits were like jade and pearls. Therefore, when Fan Wu Jie saw it for the second time in Yuan Yu's reminder, he immediately thought of this rumor. The key was that the Langxian tree might really exist on the Daiyu Divine Mountain. Before Fan Wu Jie escaped, he looked at the depths of the Divine Mountain from afar. He saw that in the depths of the celestial ground, the soil was bathed in immortal light and shone with the undying divinity of gold. The rocks were like fine jade and were truly extraordinary. The platform is made of gold and jade, and the birds and beasts on it are all pure silk. The Langshan tree is full of life, and the flowers and fruits have a taste. Those who eat it will not age and will not die. Fan Wu Jia recited the records of the two divine mountains that fell into the ruins of End in a low voice. Then he turned around and fled without any hesitation. In the distance, an old monster with messy hair and a dirty face grabbed the immortal medicine, the Langshan fruit. He laughed wildly and rushed toward the celestial ground, trying to use the great terror there to shake off his pursuers. But just as he was approaching the edge of the divine mountain, a white shadow flashed by, and the old monster with the immortal medicine disappeared without a trace. Only then did everyone calm down. The mummy glanced at the depths of the divine mountain with fear. The nine-headed hunchback old man whispered to the old monster beside him, "Did you see that white shadow clearly? It looks like a white bat." The old monster replied in a low voice. It was impossible to tell that the two of them had fought to the death and turned against each other. "I'm afraid it's a creature from the depths of the divine mountain. It was blown out by the northwest wind." The northwest wind this time is really strange. Not only did it blow out the immortal medicine, but it also blew out a mystical white bat. The platform is made of gold and jade, and the birds and beasts on it are all pure silk. The nine-headed hunchback old man whispered, "It's an albino creature from the depths of the divine mountain. I've seen a white python. It can turn the sky and earth upside down. It can stretch out its tail and stir up the blood sea. I've also seen an albino creature. It was a white bull, and on its back was the shadow of a young Taoist. When I saw it, I almost knelt down." An extremely old monster also whispered, "That could be the immortal shadow left behind by a grand heavenly lord. I've also seen a white chelan at the edge of the divine mountain. Did any of you see a white deer?" Everyone began to discuss. It seemed that no one noticed the disappearance of the two newcomers. But the mummy, the nine-headed hunchback old man, and a few other evil-looking old monsters all had a trace of cunning in their eyes. They had a tacit understanding to keep this secret. Chapter 1255. At the edge of the divine mountain and the celestial land, Fan Wu Jia stealthily crept to the bottom of a black cliff. The black cliff stood straight like a razor blade, and on the gloomy cliff there were a few dead trees. Their twisted branches were like giant pythons baring their fangs and brandishing their claws, giving off an evil vibe. It was completely different from the sacred, golden, pure land in the depths of the divine mountain and the celestial land. A white crow that was filled with an aura of death flapped its wings on a dead cypress that poked out of the black cliff, letting out a piercing cry that was filled with sorrow. However, Fan Wujia would rather stay near this strange black mountain than take a step into the golden pure land. He looked around suspiciously for a long time, as if he was looking for a trace of someone. Fan Wujia used the cosmic light true water to lock onto the aura that had been here for countless years, searching for the faintly discernible aura that he was looking for. Soon, Fan Wujia's eyes locked onto a white crow that was circling in the sky not long ago. The white crow retracted its wings and landed on a cypress at the edge of the black mountain. Fan Wujia followed the white crow's flight path, and his eyes fell on the cypress. A white crow looked at him with an innocent expression on its face. Fan Wujia laughed coldly. "What a fat and tender crow. It makes me want to eat it. I'll cut down the cypress you're sitting on and use it as firewood to make a roast crow." As soon as he finished, he made a move to sprinkle the cosmic light true water. The white crow on the tree quickly shouted, "Fanboy, how dare you attack a white crow? Don't you know that the albino creatures in the depths of the divine mountain and the celestial land are very strange and cannot be provoked?" The voice that came out of its mouth was that of Taoist Yuanyu. Then the white crow's feathers expanded, and as its bones and muscles changed shape, its feathers gradually faded, and it turned into the familiar wretched appearance of Taoist Yuanyu. Old Taoist Yuanyu winked at Fan Wujia and said with a smile, Little Fan, we are indeed fated to meet. The last time we were at the border of the ultimate ruins, I was hiding left and right, and I still met you by chance. This time, I can't escape your eyes even though I've changed so many ways. At this point, Fan Wu Jie felt a little guilty. After all, he had lured the pursuers of the Dragon Clan of the Four Seas to find old Taoist Yuan Yu and used that opportunity to force him into the depths of the bottomless ruins. Now that he thought about it, he was the one in the wrong. Old Taoist Yuan Yu was using this matter to stab him. However, Fan Wu Jie's face had long been trained to be thick. His face did not turn red, and his heart did not jump as he shouted, "Don't change the subject. Where's the thing? What is it?" Old Taoist Yuan Yu prepared to play dumb. Without saying a word, Fan Wu Jie unleashed the time light, true water, and time, splendor, mortal dust sand, unleashing a formless and colorless divine ray. Hastily, Yuan Yu stopped him and said, "Stop, stop, stop. I've kept everything. Why can't you take a joke?" Fan Wu Jie was so angry that he shouted, "You call this a joke? You're trying to steal my stuff. A fruit of the tree of immortality can't be split in half." Old Taoist Yuan Yu said patiently, "I don't think you're willing to split the divine herb of immortality in half. That's a waste." After the chaos was broken, the divine herb of immortality became a rare treasure. Only a complete divine herb of immortality can make a person immortal. The divine herb of immortality in this world, the immortal peaches of Jasper Lake, disappeared after the fall of the heaven. The ginseng fruit tree disappeared with the great deity Zhen Yuan. The realm sea is hard to find. The emperor herb of Wu Mountain is hard to find. The hanging garden of Kunlun is nowhere to be found, and the 3 islands of Penglai are far away. The 2 divine mountains of Daiyu and Yuanjiao that sank into the bottomless ruins are probably the only celestial lands that can produce the divine herb of immortality. Back then, the chaos had 10 continents in the sea. Among them, Penglai, Fenghu, Yingzhou, and the 3 immortal islands were Zhu Continent, Yuan Continent, and Yingzhou Continent. But other than that, there were 7 continents: Juku, Fenglin, Yin, Chong, Lu, Sheng, and Xian, as well as the 3 islands of Vasi, Fusang, and Fengzhang. These are the 3 islands and 10 continents. After the chaos was broken, it was hard to find them again, and perhaps they have long been destroyed. Now that the divine mountains and celestial lands have fallen into the bottomless ruins, there may be shocking secrets and dangers hidden in them. And those old monsters who mistakenly entered the Blood Sea have waited for so many years, but not a single divine herb of immortality has been blown out of the celestial lands. Therefore, the divine herb of immortality in our hands may be the only one in the universe. Fan Wu Jie snorted coldly and said, "So, are you advising me to rob it as soon as possible? I'm talking about the preciousness of this divine herb of immortality. In the universe, there are countless old monsters who would do anything for it, but compared to the opportunity to become Dara, it is nothing. Dara is a mortal who lives as long as the heavens, free from disasters and tribulations, and immortal. Once he becomes Dara, the divine herb of immortality is meaningless. Therefore, before the primordial world was broken, the divine herb of immortality was not something rare. It was just a snack for Dara. Back when the Emperor Heaven ruled the world, he often rewarded his ministers with the divine herb of immortality. It was clear that in Dara's eyes, it was not something precious. It was only after the primordial world was broken that Dara's whereabouts became elusive, and the Tao monarchs of the world had nowhere else to go, that they searched for the divine herb of immortality, something that defied the natural order of nature, and sought immortality. Little Fan, you did not hesitate to frame me and enter the bottomless ruins. I don't think it's as simple as being tired of living." Yuan Yu raised his head and stared at Fan Wu Jie. Fan Wu Jie remained silent, but Yuan Yu continued, 10,000 years ago, I saw you break the chaotic primal stone with my own eyes, and you found the mysterious golden fragment left behind by the Chaos Fiend God. Only I know that in the Tao of time, among the Tao monarchs of the world, no one could be your match. In the universe, what else is worth you coming back to the bottomless ruins? Only the Tao of Dara. This old Taoist has not achieved much in this life, and I only have some understanding of the bottomless ruins. Therefore, I also know of a legend, the legend of Dara Heaven. Fan Wu Jia said calmly, "Old Taoist, you are too humble. If Tao monarchs are nothing, then there is no great achievement in this world." "What great achievement is Tao monarchs?" Yuan Yu said resolutely and decisively. His attitude was so firm that even Fan Wu Jia was a little shocked. Fan Wu Jia began to seriously size up this wretched old Taoist, as though this was the first time he had met him. Yuan Yu still had that shifty-eyed look on his face. Maybe it was because he had been wretched for too long. His back was slightly bent, just like a little old man. But at this moment, Yuan Yu's back was straight, and his entire body was emitting an awe-inspiring aura that would not waver in the face of millions of enemies. Fan Wu Jie could feel the determination and indomitable will in his heart, and suddenly, Fan Wu Jie felt that he might have underestimated this old Taoist. He had always thought that Yuan Yu had hidden himself very deeply, but he did not think that Yuan Yu had an indomitable will to seek the Tao. But now, it seemed that he had misjudged Bufang. Below the grand, heavenly immortal, Yuan Yu's tone was mixed with reluctance, the hope that he had painstakingly pursued, and the dejection that he had failed to obtain. At this moment, Yuan Yu was no longer alone. He had cast himself into the darkness before attaining the grand, heavenly, immortal realm, searching for the subtle emotion of a miracle. He vividly portrayed a person who was once high-spirited, but gradually calmed down under the tempering of time. He once had dreams and hope, but became mediocre and worldly in the struggle of bewilderment. He was an old fox who had been soaked in time. For tens of millions of years, he laughed and scolded, and he was old and frivolous. But in his old age, when he was faced with the last glimmer of hope, he burned everything he had, and he was even willing to give up immortality, just to seek the Tao. At this moment, he seemed to have really fallen into the role he'd played, and it was even to the extent that he faintly sensed that the life and years he'd lived before he'd attained the golden immortal realm actually couldn't compare to the life he'd lived through countless years of time. Only then did Yuan Yu understand why some Dara who had attained Tao without tribulations would always reincarnate and relive the experience of attaining the Tao, and they would even torture themselves to polish the sincere feelings they had in the past. Even if it was a player who had invested enough sincere feelings into a game and had given up his long life, the game would no longer be as simple as a game to him. It would become a part of his life. In the end, you are still an ant. Fan Wu Jie's emotions were complicated, and he muttered the words softly. "I am too immersed in the role." Yuan Yu secretly used his sleeve to wipe away the tears at the corner of his eyes, and he complained in his heart, "In these hundreds of Yuan Hui, when have I ever bitterly sought the Tao of Dara? I have always been one. F*CK. I am so immersed in the role that I have forgotten that I am a Dara." Yuan Yu laughed and scolded angrily. He was old and frivolous, and he was not stingy. What did this have to do with him sinking into despair for countless years and wearing away his will? This was his true nature. Could it be that he had become a pimp because he could not find the Tao of Dara and had no choice but to sink into it? It was because he was enjoying it. Dara had no calamities or tribulations, and it had such a long time. Who didn't have a few hobbies, even if they were perverted? That was normal, right? Why did he create the identity of the maiden sect master and hang around with young Tao lords all day long, deceiving newcomers who had just arrived at the ruins of End? Could it be because he wanted to be a better spy, to be more professional? Of course, it was because of his hobbies and fun. Yuan Yu adjusted his mental state, and he was no longer in the state of being one with the play. Instead, his heart was detached from the world, and he understood his identity as Celestial Lord Yuan Yu, Dara. Yet, he maintained a wholehearted devotion, and his feelings seemed more sincere, but his rationality was detached from the world. He had an epiphany in his acting skills. He had transcended the realm of being one with the play, and he had reached the realm where his heart was outside of the play, and his heart was in the play. The old actor had finally gained some oil, and he was officially promoted to the Primeval Best Actor Award. With his back facing Fan Wu-jie, he said with his hands behind his back, "As long as you make a vow and promise to help me find the land of Dara, and when I use Dara to prove my Tao in the future, this elixir of immortality will be yours." Fan Wu-jie shook his head and said, "I can help you find the land of Dara, but after I find the land of Dara, I will also have the chance to prove my Tao in Dara, so I can't help you with all my strength. Although the elixir of immortality is good, it cannot be compared to the chance to prove my Tao in Dara. Just do your best. I don't need you to give up your Dara Tao karma to help me." Yuan Yu said lightly, "Also, to you, the elixir of immortality is another part of the foundation of Dara that gives you a greater chance of success. You walk the path of Tao Seed, and the innate timelight Tao Seed originally had the chance to fuse with the Tao, but it will take a very long time. But with the elixir of immortality, you can wait." Fan Wu-jie looked conflicted, and at this time, Yuan Yu poured a strong medicine into his mouth and said, "Do you still think that no one knows what you were plotting? Let me tell you the truth. I am the current sect master of the Beauty Maiden sect, and you trapped me in the ruins of End, but you don't know that I did it on purpose. Even falling into the blood sea of perilous lands was intentional. The third son of the Fan clan betrayed you long ago. Now the entire demon clan is following you, waiting for you to find the ruins of End, the heaven of Dara, and then rush up to take advantage of it." Fan Wu-jie was silent, and he said in a low voice, "I know." Fan Wu-jie said coldly, "Back then, when I opened the stone and found the golden shard of the chaotic era, a group of people jumped out to rob me, and each of them was a big shot of the demon clan. Even if there are many strong warriors in the Netherworld Shard, how could it be so fast? Although they hid their identities, they can fool others but not me. I can clearly see from the traces of cosmic light on their bodies that when I was gambling on the stone, they were all cheering and provoking me. The old demon who hit me with a stick was the one who said that I was the young Tao Lord of the Fan clan, the one who said that my talent was heaven-defying and not inferior to the descendants of innate life forms. And that old monster who said that he was old, you have no idea how lively he was when he hit me. The one who looked shocked and shouted that he was the Nanmingli fire, and then used the fire of the 9 hells to cover my face, almost disfiguring me, and burned me to the point where there was no way to go. I remember all of this," Fan Wu-jie said with a twisted expression. "At that time, I felt that something was off, but I didn't know what all of you were trying to do. It wasn't until those 3 ancestors of mine tricked me into searching for the origin immortal lands. They repeatedly advised me against it while sending the clues to the origin immortal lands to me. Do you think I'm an idiot? Although they were very clean, relying on coincidences, and even killed many people so that no one could find anything. But the most difficult trace to erase in the world is time." Fan Wu-jie said in a low voice, "You have exposed your biggest secret. How can you win my trust? How can I trust someone who schemed against me? My biggest secret. Hee. Not only was Yuan Yu not nervous, he even wanted to laugh. "Young man, do you think you have seen through everything? In fact, you have not even touched the edge. You know that the devil cult is scheming against you, that your 3 ancestors are playing tricks, and at most you know about Fa Jing and the others, but there is no way you know about Taoist Master Ziyang. In the realm of Tao Lord, you can't see the whole picture, let alone the faint traces of Dara behind it. I've already found a few Dara sneaky. The water in this game is deep. There's also the Nether River Patriarch who's plotting something, the great heavenly lord of numinous treasure who's secretly making a move, the Rahu Patriarch who's being used, and the other great divines who are curious about this. So you see the level of Tao Lord, but you can't see Dara behind it. I see Dara behind it, but I can't guess the great medium's moves. What is Ancestor River Styx thinking? Is it related to Ro and the 4 fairy slaying swords? What role is Master Lingbao playing here? What identity am I involved in this? The ultimate. What other secrets are hidden in it? On the surface, Yuan Yu seemed to be very sincere as he replied. The elixir of immortality is the greatest sincerity. You may know something, but you still don't understand the horror behind it. Our devil cult is only one of the parties. Mystic Door and Buddhism are involved. I am afraid that Master Fa Jing has already entered the Blood Sea calamity. He has a primordial spirit treasure in his hand, and the people of Mystic Door are hiding very deeply. Even if we plot against Buddhism and devil cult, when we come to the land of Dara, it is not surprising that they suddenly jump out to take the peaches. And the people of devil cult are easier to deal with me as a spy. So when I saw the elixir of immortality, I realized that this is the only chance for us to reconcile and gain each other's trust. Only by working together can we have a chance to prove our Tao in Dara. Fan Wu Jie said calmly. So you decisively gave up the elixir of immortality to win my trust, and at the same time reveal my identity so that there would be no more pain between us. At the same time, you prove to me that the benefits you seek must be higher than the elixir of immortality. Then only Dara, you prove that you only seek Dara. At this time, we have a foundation of common interests. Because you prove that you no longer represent the devil cult, you only represent yourself. In this way, the two of us, who are alone, have the possibility of working together. Although Fan Wu Jie had guessed Yuan Yu's thoughts, he did not. He was still shocked by Yuan Yu's decisiveness and decisiveness. He was willing to give up the hope of immortality in order to fight for the biggest chance to prove his Tao in Dara. The old Taoist who looked wretched on the surface had a heart of Tao of steel inside. At this time, Fan Wu Jie thought of the charming celestial being of the beauty sect and remembered the words, "Bring him back." Fan Wu Jie sighed inwardly. He wondered if this goddess had seen through the determination and ruthlessness hidden beneath the surface of her lover's unscrupulous appearance. "All right, I promise you." Fan Wu Jie stretched out his hand and said, "Let's form an alliance." Old Taoist Yuan Yu high-fived him and revealed a familiar wretched smile. Fan Wu Jie wiped his hands and said, "Where is the elixir of immortality?" Yuan Yu laughed, showing his yellow teeth. Then, under Fan Wu Jie's burning gaze, he scratched his throat. Blarg. Seeing the old Taoist wipe the shiny jade bead that was full of honey juice with his dirty sleeve, Fan Wu Jie really had the urge to turn hostile. At least, he wanted to leave a size 49 shoe print on that old man's wretched face. But when he thought about the old Taoist's unfathomable divine art of transformation and the overall situation of working together, he resisted the urge. "Like hell, I'll believe you." Fan Wu Jie looked at the sky speechlessly and made up his mind to swallow the jade bead like the old Taoist. Old Taoist Yuan Yu said from the side, "That's right. I know that the elixir of immortality is very difficult to refine, and it won't be easily digested even if you swallow it. Instead, it's the best way to protect it. If anyone wants to snatch the elixir of immortality, they'll have to kill you for it if you don't hand it over willingly." "Shut up." Fan Wu Jie raised his head and scolded in a muffled voice. Fan Wu Jie stood side by side with old Taoist Yuan Yu. He asked in a low voice, "Since you dragged me into the Blood Sea on purpose, we've fallen out with those old monsters again. Now that the mummy is no longer leading the way, you should know how to escape from here, right? Say something. Weren't you the one who told me to shut up?" Yuan Yu said indignantly. "Speak human language. There's a shortcut at the bottom of the eye of the Blood Sea that leads to the returning ruins. We can escape from there." Chapter 1256. "The shortcut you mentioned is at the bottom of the Blood Sea?" Fan Wu Jie poked his head out and took a glance at the blood ocean that was rolling with waves of blood, squinted his eyes, and asked, "So, how are we going to get down there?" "Don't tell me we're going to jump down." "I don't know either." Yuan Yu stroked his short goatee and mumbled, "That's what he told me." "Him?" Fan Wu Jie was furious when he heard that Yuan Yu had also heard it from someone else. "So you heard it from someone else too? You dare to lead me to a dead end after hearing some unreliable information. That is to say, other than the Blood Sea, There might be a shortcut that leads deeper into the ultimate. What else do you know? Shut up. I've almost figured it out. Yuan Yu muttered to himself as he calculated with his fingers, observing the terrain of the divine mountain and reviewing the terrain he had seen along the way. Old Taoist, you don't look like such an unreliable person. Fan Wu Jie continued to ramble on. Just who was it that spoke to you so casually, and you actually believed it so completely? Are you so sure that his words are reliable? Even if he is, no one has ever left the Blood Sea Calamity's eyes. So how can his information be reliable? Fan Wu Jie was a little dejected. You, Sai, you don't know who he is. Yuan Yu said in a distant tone. Fan Wu Jie looked up and said, Tell me who he is. That great immortal could point out a way that countless old monsters trapped here couldn't find even after countless years of tribulations? Ancestor River Styx, Yuan Yu said faintly. Fan Wu Jie was speechless. His voice was dry as he looked at Yuan Yu with a strange look in his eyes. You're saying that the slaughtering demon ancestor personally came to you in your dreams and told you that there is a way out of the Blood Sea Calamity's eyes? Yuan Yu looked at him as if he was looking at an idiot and said, I have to walk 8 lifetimes to be able to dream of the slaughtering demon ancestor. Do I look like someone whose 18 generations of ancestors were buried in the forbidden land of desolation? The Blood Sea Calamity of Ashura clan is indeed terrifying. No one has ever escaped from it. It was originally the forbidden land where the slaughtering demon ancestor killed the great Ashura King Poya. Later, it became a land of destruction in the ultimate. Finally, it was used as a prison by the Shamoriai king to imprison the demons of destruction and the Shura clan's traitors. But this is the only place where we can get rid of the forces behind you who are coveting the land of Dara. Otherwise, how are we going to fight against behemoths like the Mystic Sect, Buddhist Sect, and Demon Sect? Yuan Yu sneered and said, If you want to escape from their control, you have to play the most unexpected move. Is there anything more unexpected than falling into a hopeless situation? Only in such a dangerous place can they be caught off guard and unprepared, giving us a chance to fish in troubled waters. Even if something goes wrong, aren't they still responsible for it? In order to find the land of Dara, won't they have to get us out of here? Furthermore, others can escape from this Blood Sea prison, but it might not be able to imprison me. Yuan Yu said smugly. Fan Wu Jie lowered his head and pondered. The Blood Sea impasse trapped Dara to death. How are we going to escape? Unless I have the blueprint of this prison. Yuan Yu slapped his thigh and said in high spirits, In the demonic Tao, there was once a powerful sect, the Blood Sea Demon Sect. It is said that it is the direct descendant of the Blood Sea Orthodoxy, and later merged with the great Ashura demon cult. It is said that their fundamental orthodoxy is the massacred demon ancestors' Blood Sea scripture. When I was young, I accidentally obtained a fragment of the Blood Sea scripture. There was only one complete divine power in it. It was an imitation of the primordial corroding Blood Sea in the ultimate. It also included the internal model of the Blood Sea Calamity Eye. That divine power could summon a projection of the Blood Sea Calamity Eye's huge whirlpool and use the destructive calamity power to torture the enemy to death. Do you know what the only flaw of this ability is? Taoist Yuan Yu asked with a smug smile. At the bottom of the eye of the sea, Fan Wu Jie knew what he was going to say. This is the divine art that the massacring demon patriarch personally passed down. It naturally contains the secrets and structure of the Blood Sea Calamity that the massacring demon patriarch knows. Of course, there is no one in this world who knows this place better than the massacred demon ancestor who created this Blood Sea, and this Blood Sea is his clone. Of course, his words are very reliable. So as long as we can find a way to break this technique, we can escape this place. Fan Wu Jie said excitedly. No wonder you dared to come down here. So you have the blueprint left by the designer of this place. Then, what about the technique? Take it out and let us study it. With our wisdom combined, can't we find a way out? I gave you the blueprint a long time ago, Yuan Yu said with a smile, as if everything was under his control. Fan Wu Jia was slightly surprised, and he touched his belly. Yuan Yu shook his head and said, "It is not the immortal divine medicine. Don't you think the demon god tattoo on your body is a little too lifelike? Don't you find it strange that the great Tao of destruction has worn away all the bits and pieces on your body? Why is there still one tattoo that has not changed at all?" Fan Wu Jie took off his outer robe, and the tattoo of an 8-armed, angry demon god was revealed. Now that he looked closely, he could indeed see that the demon god was extraordinary and strange. Its blood-red eyes were flowing with extremely evil, demonic nature, and its 8 arms were waving as if they were going to destroy everything. The demon god's rage, the ferociousness of its red face, and the aura of great destruction and calamity, there was indeed a strange demonic nature to it. All the other tattoos on his body were blurred, and even the divine characters and dragon chapters on them could not be seen clearly. However, this demon god was the only one who did not fade or become blurry under the destruction of the Blood Sea Tribulation Eye. Instead, it became clearer and more powerful. "But this is my own tattoo," Fan Wu Jie said in shock. Yuan Yu said proudly, "If you want to hide something, what could be better than hiding it in someone else's mind? I was afraid that someone could use a strange divine ability to search my memory and see through my big plan. So I cut away the true meaning of the technique in my memory and hid in your mind. That way, the true meaning would secretly influence your mind and draw it out through your hand. How could the divine ability created by the demon ancestor be destroyed so easily? Things created at their level, whether they are tangible or intangible, have an indestructible essence. Even if you destroy its carrier, it can still subtly duplicate itself. The divine abilities of the devil path are passed down from generation to generation because of the demon ancestors' methods. Have you ever heard of some righteous sects annihilating some demonic sects and burning the scriptures of demonic sects? Then, countless years later, there will be a genius in that sect who, through the remaining spoils of war from that battle, suddenly comprehended some kind of inspiration and was infected by the demonic nature. Then, he went crazy and created some kind of strange and terrifying magical power, betrayed the sect, and became a demonic giant? This was also the first time Fan Wu Jie had heard of such a story. At this time, he connected it to the story of the rise of the Fan clan's 3 ancestors. In the past, in the Brahma Heaven realm, the Righteous Path clans destroyed the last Evil Path sect that opposed them. The Blood Diagram sect, which had a long history, was at peace. The Brahma Heaven realm was filled with righteous people, and the Righteous Path flourished for a time. The righteous sects entered an unprecedented era of glory. At that time, the Brahma Heaven realm established a 9-grade system. Every 1,000 years, the Tao monarchs of the clans would determine the number of people who could become immortals based on the resources and spiritual energy of the Brahma Heaven realm. They would select the most talented and outstanding disciples from the poor families and nurture them. Those who were not included in the system were illegal cultivators. They were all idiots who stole the fortune of heaven and earth and would be killed by the heavenly tribulation. Every year, among the 3 great clans, the 9-grade immortal officials would tour the clans and hold banquets, competitions, and secret explorations to evaluate the cultivation aptitude of the disciples. At that time, the clans created many cultivation secret realms. Every clan had all kinds of competitions, and the whole Brahma Heaven realm had all kinds of rankings. Among the younger generation, there were all kinds of Tao gatherings, tea parties, immortal banquets, and arenas. The whole world's cultivation resources were locked in all kinds of secret realms. One had to participate in this social circle and evaluation system to obtain cultivation resources and opportunities. The disciples of the clans had to learn to be famous from a young age and compete with other outstanding disciples of the clans. In the beginning, they did cultivate many outstanding disciples of the clans. But in the end, the system gradually deteriorated. In the beginning, the interests of the poor were sacrificed, and then it was the turn of the small clans. In the end, Even the non-direct descendants of the three great clans were suppressed, and the whole cultivation environment became stinky. The Fan clan's third ancestor was originally a disciple of the outer branch. In the clan's minor competition, because of his talent and extraordinary bone structure, he was hated by the direct descendants of the main branch. In the end, he was plotted against on the arena, and his bone structure was broken. His immortal rank dropped from the upper 5th grade to the lower 9th grade. But the Fan clan's third ancestor persevered and endured all kinds of suppression and revenge. After being demoted to a slave, he still cultivated hard. In the end, in the family's abandoned dump, he found the spoils of war from annihilating the Bloodchart sect, a broken iron ring. After that, the Fan clan's third ancestor sacrificed himself to the devil. He sacrificed the entire branch and took over the body of a noble youth of the Fan clan. He burned, killed, robbed, and was ruthless. He secretly gathered the small clans and geniuses of the poor who were left behind in the Brahma Heaven realm and rebuilt the Bloodchart demon sect. In the end, he caused a major event. He sacrificed a world that the Brahma Heaven realm was preparing to swallow, created a destructive tribulation, and triggered the great Tao of the Ruins of End. He destroyed the 9-grade immortal rank system that had lasted for millions of years in the Brahma Heaven realm and became a Tao Lord. It could be said that he was the Fan clan's third ancestor and was also the son of luck. Fan Wujie originally thought that it was his third ancestor's luck that was extraordinary, and the Bloodchart demon sect was just a stepping stone for the third ancestor. Now that he thought about it, it was clearly because the Bloodchart demon sect's luck was not extinguished and the fundamental cultivation method was not destroyed. The Brahma Heaven realm continued to develop, and it had already provided a rich soil for the demonic path. At that time, the conflict had clearly accumulated like a mountain, and it was only missing a match. And the fundamental cultivation method of the Bloodchart demon sect was that match. Even if there was no Fan clan's third ancestor, there would still be the Wang clan's first ancestor and the Xie clan's second ancestor. Fan Wujie looked down at his arm and half of his shoulder that had 8 arms stretched out and danced. He felt the deep demonic nature of the tattoo. He was secretly vigilant. What true meaning of the demon ancestor? It could have been drawn on anyone. Since it was so important, why didn't the wretched old Taoist draw it on himself? There must be something fishy. Fan Wujie did not believe that such a strange thing lying on his body would not affect him at all. Yes, the true meaning left behind by the demon ancestor was not destroyed, and it would always be obtained by the later generations. Then, with a moment of great luck, they would revive the demonic path sect. But why did all those geniuses who had comprehended the true meaning of the demonic path fall into the demonic path? That old bastard wanted to plot against me and lure me into the demonic path. Fan Wujie glanced at Yuanyu. Yuanyu was just short of whistling to prove that he did not know anything. The immortal herb that flew out of nowhere from the depths of the sacred mountain. A few years ago, I accidentally found a remnant of the Blood Sea scripture from a secret dual cultivation manual. Let me think, what other opportunities do I have? This time, I have to throw them all to this fated person. After this, there will be no more opportunities. Ancestor, don't throw things at me anymore. Now, when I see the opportunities you give out, my liver trembles. I don't dare to throw them away, and I don't dare to take them away. I can only go around and give them to the righteous path's talents and fated people. Yuanyu knew. This was the massacred demon ancestor urging him to work hard. If the demonic path wanted to develop and become strong, other than having to produce their own blood, they also had to go to the mystic door and poach people from the Buddhist path. Usually, the ones they poached were the best. But as a spy in the demonic path, Yuanyu's heart was in the mystic door. How could he do that? So, when Riverstyx thought of him, he would send some opportunities to him, urging him to find more clients. If he did not find a fated person to give it to, then he would form a fated relationship with Riverstyx. In any case, Yuanyu did not want to know what would happen if he formed a fated relationship with Riverstyx. Ever since he was given an opportunity by Riverstyx once, When he encountered such a situation, he would often give it away at the first moment. Saving his life was more important. This time, the northwest wind of the sacred mountain blew out a fruit of the immortal tree when they arrived. No matter how he looked at it, it was strange. Of course, Yuan Yu had to make the first move and give it to the person next to him who was supposed to be the scapegoat. This time, it was obvious that Fan Wujie was the center of the setup. If Yuan Yu did not act earlier, he would also be in the eyes of the tribulation. When the time came, who knew how big of a scapegoat he would have to bear? It's yours, it's all yours. Yuan Yu's eyes seemed to inadvertently sweep over Fan Wujie, who was studying his tattoo. Fan Wujie was very shocked. He looked up at Yuan Yu and said, "This is the only weakness you said, the one that exists at the bottom of the blood sea, yes." Yuan Yu slightly touched the 8-armed demon god on Fan Wujie's right arm, and the demon god turned into a bloody eye, condensing the tribulation power of destruction. Yuan Yu reached out and gently touched the bottom of the eye of the blood sea, the sharp horn at the bottom of the blood-color vortex. The entire eye of the blood sea was instantly thrown into chaos. The tribulation power of destruction clashed everywhere, and the phantom quickly collapsed. Fan Wujie opened his right palm and slapped it. The 8-armed demon god on his right arm roared, and his entire right arm was wrapped in a bloody storm vortex. Yuan Yu was shocked, and he screamed, "Fanboy, are you trying to kill me?" The blood-colored vortex attracted the tribulation power of destruction in the eye, causing the vortex on Fan Wujie's right arm to expand hundreds of times, lifting all the dead trees and strange rocks on the black cliff. The black cliff trembled strangely, and it collided with the blood-colored vortex. The strange Tao patterns that appeared on the cliff shattered the entire blood-colored whirlpool. However, Fan Wujie and Yuan Yu could sense that this was a power that was billions of times stronger than the blood vortex. From the beginning to the end, the black cliff on the outskirts of the Divine Mountain had not been able to destroy the structure of the blood vortex. Fan Wujie sneered and said, "Why don't you say that the only weakness of this divine ability is that it can only be grasped by completely withstanding its power? The weakness at the bottom of the blood sea is right under the most destructive vortex of the blood sea tribulation eye. If you want to go down there, you have to endure the full power of the blood sea tribulation eye. Didn't you say that this divine ability is unbreakable?" Fan Wujie shouted angrily and flew into the air, preparing to beat up this unreliable old Taoist. Yuan Yu covered his head and scurried away. He said anxiously, "Wait, even if we can't break this divine ability, it doesn't mean that no one else can. Don't forget, the Blood Sea Tribulation Eye's blueprint is no different from the real thing." Fan Wujie snorted coldly and said, "I know that you're going to tell me that King Poya was killed by this divine ability of the Slaughter Demon Ancestor. Even though he was already dead and his body was suppressed here, he must have found a way to break this divine ability before he died. That was why he grabbed a fragment of Daiyu Divine Mountain from the bottom of the Blood Sea and used his right hand to reach out of the Blood Sea to create a pure land for his old subordinates. So, the mummy and the others do know how to escape from this place, and we know part of their escape plan. We know that they're going to escape from the bottom of the Blood Sea, but what we don't know is how to get to the bottom of the Blood Sea. Naturally, someone has already figured it out for us." Fan Wujie said coolly, "I just want you to know that if you keep me in suspense, I'll turn against you." Yuan Yu calculated quickly and said, "I'm not selling it. I'm not going to keep you in suspense anymore." King Poya wanted to save his old subordinates, so he naturally had to prepare a safe escape route for them. But he didn't have the time to tell them too much, because he couldn't be sure what he could say and what he couldn't. In the bottomless ruins, it's normal to die if you know too much, and it'll be a very strange death. So, he can't tell his old subordinates what he knows and can only hint at some things. For example, he can't tell his old subordinates the structure of the Blood Sea Eye of Destruction, but he can create a miniature Blood Sea in his palm and replicate its structure. He can't protect his old subordinates to the bottom of the Blood Sea Eye, but he can use his own body to create a safe passage to the bottom of the sea. King Poya stepped on the bottom of the Blood Sea, raised his right hand high, and left the Blood Sea. His body is the safest bridge to the bottom of the Blood Sea. Yuan Yu said, "So, as long as we can find the passage that leads to King Poya's body, we can leave the Blood Sea through his feet. Then this passage is—" Fan Wu-jie turned to look at the Blood Sea in his palm outside the black cliff. Yuan Yu nodded and said, "It's at the bottom of this Blood Sea. This Blood Sea is so calm, and the reason I haven't figured out King Poya's plan is because I haven't connected this Blood Sea in my palm with the Blood Sea outside. I didn't expect this Blood Sea eye to be a blueprint of the Blood Sea eye, and it's a model that's more intuitive than the one I have. The reason this Blood Sea eye hasn't formed into a whirlpool must be because someone has blocked the Blood Sea eye. When the time comes, the Blood Sea eye will turn into a giant whirlpool, and all we have to do is control the divine turtle to carry the divine mountain into the whirlpool, and we'll be able to break through the Blood Sea eye and enter King Poya's blood vessel. King Poya's blood vessel is a giant underground blood river, and the divine turtle will swim to the bottom of King Poya's feet, where the destructive tribulation power in the Blood Sea calamity eye is the weakest. With Daiyu Divine Mountain as the outer shell, we'll be able to resist the final destructive tribulation power and escape from here. The plan is perfect." Fan Wu-jie clapped his hands and praised, as expected of the great Azura King, the subordinate of demon ancestor of destruction. Before he died, he thought of using his body to create an escape route to protect the last of his people and old subordinates. Not only does King Poya have a power so strong that not even the destructive tribulation power can destroy him, he also has the wisdom to see life and death as normal. The most admirable thing about him is his heart to protect his people. No wonder his old subordinates didn't complain when they were trapped in this place and tortured for so many eons. They remained loyal to him. Such noble sentiments. Fan Wu-jie raised his head and said, "It makes me want to kill them all even more." Yuan Yu nodded slightly and said, "Judging from the loyalty King Poya and his subordinates have shown to Ancestor Ro, these Destruction Devil disciples will never give up on saving their leader, Demon Ancestor Destruction Ro, after they get out of this place. This kind of loyalty is admirable, but this kind of ambition cannot be indulged. Kill them." Fan Wu-jie clenched his right hand and made a gesture of crushing them to death. Yuan Yu gave him a look of approval.